Chapter 886. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The fire Chileen paced back and forth in the cage anxiously, slamming into the cage from time to time. Unfortunately, as soon as it slammed into the cage, a dark red pattern appeared on the cage and bounced the fire Chileen back. In the auction house, another person's face was gloomy, looking at the fire Chileen with greed and reluctance. If I wasn't forced, I wouldn't want to give you away in such a way. What a pity, such a good thing. However, he had already suffered too much in this aspect. If he didn't quickly send this scourge into the hands of others, he would definitely lose his life. Qin Yu suddenly felt a malice, but this malice wasn't directed at him. This malice didn't seem to be directed at anyone. It just lingered on the fire Chileen for a moment. One-Eyed saw the gloomy man sitting in the private room. He could only see from afar, but he couldn't hear the voice in the private room. Thus, he revealed everything that he had discovered. That person probably knows something. Although the fire Chileen is a good thing, we should still be careful. Master, don't take risks easily. Qin Yu was only concerned about that person's strength. He knew that that person's strength had just reached the immortal soul realm. He wasn't even close to reaching the immortal soul realm like immortal Donglin and Lin Xuanyu. Such strength was just not bad, but not enough to attract his attention. At this moment, all the big and small forces were shouting crazily. It was because the price was crazy. Many small sects couldn't support it anymore. They had to leave regretfully. They could only watch from afar, but they couldn't get close. After all, this was a legendary divine beast, and they naturally couldn't get close. Only large forces with sufficient funds could snatch the divine beast. Over and over again, there were only a few sounds, especially towards the end. Only the Xiantian sect had the strength to continue bidding. But not long after, he was also defeated. But now, only the Qingguang Sacred Ground and Wanhao Villa had the ability to continue bidding. Wanhao Villa had always been famous for its wealth. Although its strength was only average, it had extremely strong financial resources. Part of it was due to the harvest of various minerals. The other part was from doing business. Even in Baixia City, nearly 1/3 of the shops belonged to Wanhao Manor. It was also because of their wealth that they were able to build good relationships with many large sects and powers. His daily life was quite comfortable. But who would be willing to live under someone else's roof for a long time? Now that they had encountered a divine beast, they would take it down at all costs. As long as they could be nurtured and protected in the future, it was only a matter of time before Wanhao Manor became a major force. Don't tell me that we are just going to watch such a top-quality fire Chileen be taken away by someone else. Lin Xuanyu, can you make a decision or not? This is the fire Chileen divine beast, a rare sight that only appears once in 10,000 years. Lin Xuanyu's expression didn't look good. The reason he stopped wasn't because he had any special plans, but because they didn't have enough money on hand. Although he had brought a lot of money with him this time. But after all, it was not a force that was famous for its wealth like Wanhao Manor. Right now, the number of people on the other side had already reached 1 million. If he hadn't bought the White Dragon pill, in that case, they could continue to participate in the competition. But now, they didn't have that much money on hand. Anyway, it doesn't mean that it will fall into their hands even if they buy it, so it doesn't matter. As long as we hide our identities and snatch it in the end, we won't have to spend a single cent to get the divine beast in our hands. It will be a greater contribution, and at least then, we will have the initiative. Whoever buys the divine beast fire Chileen will be in a passive position. Lin Xuanyu's words finally appeased most of the people. However, they continued to compete, and their voices were extremely loud. The fire Chileen became even more anxious. It kept banging against the cage even though it was injured. Soon, its body was covered with wounds of various sizes. One of its scales even fell to the ground, and blood seeped out of the wound. The gloomy man sitting in the private room on the second floor couldn't help but change his expression when he saw this scene. Without saying anything, he ran out directly. That fellow ran away. It's almost at the entrance. What? No one knew what the one-eyed man saw, but he suddenly looked panicked. The real fire Chileen is here. No wonder he sent the fire Chileen to the auction. It turns out that he has such a huge problem on his back. After all, it was a legendary divine beast. If the adult fire Chileen came, it would definitely be angrier if it saw the injured baby fire Chileen. It might even destroy the entire auction house or even the entire city in a fit of anger. By then, the exchange would more or less be affected. No one knew how many people would be injured or killed. The baby fire Chileen seemed to have sensed its family in the distance. It struggled even more violently and kept banging around in the cage. The auctioneer used all kinds of methods but couldn't calm the fire Chileen down. In the end, he decided to watch the bidding for the time being. The people from the Wanhao villa had already shouted to the end. The price reached a whopping 5 million yuan. This was an astronomical figure. If all of it was converted into resources, it would be even more massive. However, this wasn't a big deal to the Wanhao villa. At most, their vitality would be slightly damaged. Soon, they would be able to quickly fill this gap. However, for other sects, even if they pooled their resources, they might not be able to easily gather this amount of money. The disciples of the Wanhao villa came out to participate in the exchange and brought a huge sum of several million yuan with them. This was the most shocking thing. However, Qin Yu knew that all of this would soon be broken. Soon after, the entire auction house shook. The extremely sturdy building, which was built with special materials, had been shattered. Fragments kept falling down. There weren't many people who were hit. Most of them were looking at the void with fear in their eyes. With such a huge commotion, no one knew what kind of terrifying existence had arrived. Above the immortal level, there was the Holy King. Such a powerful force had probably surpassed the immortal level. The violent and terrifying aura instantly swept the entire auction house. Sparks were mixed in the violent aura. No matter what it encountered, it burned instantly. In the blink of an eye, the entire city was filled with sparks, and it was difficult to extinguish them. The fire Chileen in the cage wasn't affected at all. Instead, it became more energetic. It kept struggling to run out. Chapter 887. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The powerful aura made all the powerful people in the city rush out. The adult fire Chileen flew over. The flames around its body were strong, and even its eyes seemed to turn red. In the midst of the chaos, Qin Yu directly left the auction house. This place would soon completely collapse. However, some people didn't realize that they were trying to steal the fire Chileen in the chaos. The people from Wanhao villa rushed out and took the fire Chileen away. They didn't know that the trouble in the auction house was caused by this little guy. If they took the fire Chileen, it would only attract the attention of the adult fire Chileen. As expected. As soon as they stepped out, the fire Chileen rushed over. Even if there were a few powerful people in front of them, they couldn't stop the adult fire Chileen. Let go of my child. You despicable and shameless humans. After the people from Wanhao villa came out, they knew something was wrong when they saw the adult fire Chileen. They were holding the young fire Chileen in their hands. It seemed to have something to do with this. When they connected the words of the adult fire Chileen, everyone understood that the young fire Chileen was the cause of everything. Whoever had the young fire Chileen would be targeted by the adult fire Chileen. Under the attack of such a powerful person, their strength could only be considered insignificant. They couldn't hold on for long. They would definitely die. Even the people from the auction house didn't expect there to be such a relationship. The owner of the auction house, who escaped in a hurry, immediately ordered people to find the seller who sent the young fire Chileen. However, the person was already dead when they found him. The adult fire Chileen came with an extremely violent aura, and its target was the auction house. The door plaque fell on the spot. There was no one there at first. However, at that time, the person happened to know the inside story and was about to rush out. Just like that, he was smashed to death. Now, the culprit had become a cold corpse, and the fire Chileen was still extremely violent. It didn't want to let anyone go. This was a problem that couldn't be solved. The few powerful people who rushed over were gloomy when they heard about this. They could only step forward and try to negotiate with the fire Chileen. Senior, I'm afraid this is just a misunderstanding. We didn't know. I don't care if you know or not. Hand over my child. You shameless humans. How dare you drug me and steal my child when I wasn't paying attention? Furthermore, you tortured my child to such an extent. I, Huarong, will fight you to the death. The small fire Chelin in the hands of Wanhao Manor became the target of public criticism. Even they were being stared at by countless people. They stared at him with fear, worry, schadenfreude, and so on. Qin Yu was observing Huarong's strength. This adult fire Chelin and the baby fire Chelin seemed to be carved from the same mold. One could tell at a glance that there must be a relationship between them. However, Huiji Lin's strength was much higher than the few experts who had arrived later. Although he was facing several people at the same time, his aura was not at a disadvantage. A few experts who arrived later noticed the little fire Chelin that was being controlled by someone else. Immediately, the thought of taking it for himself rose in his heart. But at that moment, they forgot that there was an adult fire Chelin beside them. The fire Chelin immediately noticed his mood change. His temper, which was already extremely unbearable, was instantly ignited. Go to hell. Despicable humans, you've always been a group of hypocrites and liars. The fire Chelin no longer hesitated and directly charged. Under this powerful impact, the few experts were soon scattered in all directions. They were immediately shocked. Originally, they thought that if they joined hands, they would be able to more or less fight an even match. But now it seemed that the strength of both sides was not equal at all. Divine beasts were born with an advantage, not to mention that they were slightly stronger than them. It would not take much effort to take their lives. How can it be? Cough, cough. The struggling little fire Chelin suddenly twitched twice and flipped over in the middle of the cage, spitting blood from its mouth. Huarong's expression changed immediately. Along the way, she had trampled countless people to death under her 4 hooves, but she did not care. If you continue like this, the little fire Chelin will die even faster. Huarong's expression suddenly changed. Although she did not know who was talking, she had to be cautious and stop immediately because it concerned the little fire Chelin's life and death. Sure enough, after the collision, the little fire Chelin's situation looked worse. It looked like it was on the verge of death. Qin Yu walked out of the crowd and went directly to the cage. Because it happened too suddenly, the people of Wanhao Villa did not react and just watched Qin Yu carry the little fire Chelin away. The little fire Chelin was poisoned with a very special kind of poison. It needed to be taken from the cold flowers that grew on the 10,000-year-old mysterious ice and more than a dozen kinds of precious medicinal herbs to make this special poison. If there was an extremely strong power of fire around, it would be a strong impact, and the internal organs would be shattered by this strong impact. Huarong was the root cause of this poison. She was a fire Chelin and was better at controlling fire. In particular, she had the body of a divine beast, and her every move was accompanied by extremely strong firepower. The angrier she was to kill people, the stronger the power of fire around her, and the little fire Chelin would naturally be hit by an extremely strong impact. It did not die immediately because the body of a divine beast was stronger. However, if Huarong continued to approach, the little fire Chelin would die on the spot. Do you still want to continue to rush over? You are poison to him. Qin Yu's expression is indifferent. The movement of his hand is also very gentle. He had already taken out some good medicine and fed it to the little fire Chelin. The little fire Chelin's injuries were already under control. In addition, his movements were gentle and he had the aura of a dragon. Not only did the little fire Chelin not make a fuss, but it also fell asleep peacefully. Seeing this, Huarong had to step back no matter how unwilling she was. She could not care about anything, but she could not care about her child. Just like that, a huge crisis was suddenly stopped at the last moment. Mu Bai, the city lord of Baixia City, looked at this scene from afar and suddenly asked, "Do you know who this child is?" Not only was he not afraid at such a critical moment, but he was also able to think of a solution in such a short time. What a rare talent! Mu Bai couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration, and even wanted to recruit him under his wing. Chapter 888. Not far away, a line of sight fell on him. Huarong sized up the person in front of her. "What do you have to convince me?" Maybe what you said is true, but this is all your fault. The pressure of an expert was released without missing a single bit. Many people could not react in time. All of them more or less suffered some minor injuries. They could only retreat in panic. Only 2 people did not retreat. Qin Yu's expression was normal, as if he did not notice this extremely strong pressure. Hu Rong's strength was not bad, but compared to Shentian Senzun, she was still far from it. Just like that. Only 2 people were left on the spot. Seeing him like this, Hu Rong's mood improved a lot. No matter what race, they all worshipped the strong. Qin Yu was able to stand on the spot without moving, without leaving a trace, and his expression was still relaxed. This naturally made her look at him in a different light, and her attitude softened a lot. You are indeed different. Compared to others, you are much more magnanimous. If the person negotiating with me was you, I would still be willing to have a good talk with you. I don't care what reason you have, my child naturally needs to grow up safely. Otherwise, I will destroy all of you at all cost. Can you do that? Qin Yu smiled and took 2 steps back. As expected, as he retreated further away from Hu Rong, the little fire Chelin in his arms also became more stable, and its expression was calm. City Lord, have you seen enough? Now that the situation is under control, if you don't take the initiative to stand out as a master, do you really want me to solve this matter? Although it was not impossible, comforting the little fire Chelin would require a lot of things. He did not have these things on him to take care of the child. Moreover, if he wanted to stand in the distance and wait for the matter to settle down without taking any benefits, how could there be such a good thing in this world? Mu Bai was surprised that he was discovered. One must know that his strength was much stronger than Qin Yu, and he was an expert of the immortal spirit realm. This was somewhat different from the information he had received. He originally thought that he was just a person with some ability. Now, it seemed that his strength was extraordinary. Regardless of whether it was the fact that he was able to maintain a calm expression under the pressure of an expert, or the fact that he was able to easily discover him when he was hiding his aura in the distance. This was definitely not something an ordinary Shen immortal could do. What are you talking about? Of course I have to come out and take responsibility. But I was a little busy just now, so I came a little late. I didn't delay anything, right? Mu Bai's face was full of smiles. No one would have been able to tell that he had been watching from afar the entire time. One-eyed quietly exposed his lie. He had clearly seen this person from afar. He stood in a remote corner. If he hadn't glanced over by chance, he would have thought that there was nothing there. You really know how to boast. Each one is more sanctimonious than the other. But Qin Yu knew. There were many people who knew that the city lord had been watching from the sidelines. It was not that he had any evidence, but that he had a rough idea of what was going on. With such a big thing happening in Baixia City, how could the city lord be delayed by other things? It was just an excuse. However, Hu Rong's eyes and ears were extremely sharp. She heard this voice, and her gaze landed on One-eyed. Why do you still have such a small thing with you? Its aura is very unique. It seems to be mixed with the aura of chaos. As she spoke, a dazed look appeared in her eyes. But soon, it turned into confusion. She couldn't remember where she had felt such an aura. After Mu Bai came, things became much simpler. As the city lord, there was still a huge difference between him and Lan Xia. The difference in strength was like heaven and earth. Let's not talk about that for now. There was a huge difference between Cloud Immortal City and Baixia City. One Baixia City was comparable to 10 Cloud Immortal Cities. As the city lord, Mu Bai did not have any messy forces around him. In the entire city, he was the only one who could cover the sky with one hand. But because he had a long-term vision, he had a good relationship with some big forces. Gradually, Baixia City became more prosperous. And as the city lord, he naturally had more power to speak. Mu Bai's important follower stood up and reached out to take the little fire Chelin. But just as he reached out, the little fire Chelin felt an unfamiliar aura and became restless. Not only did it cry and make a fuss, but it was also disturbed. It opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of fire. Although it was not very powerful, the follower did not expect such a thing to happen. He did not have time to dodge and ran back with his face covered in dirt. Looking at the little fire Chileen, he said, "Little bastard. What did you say?" Huarong was so angry that she stomped that person to death. "Little ant, how dare you be so rash in front of me? That's my son. You have no right to talk nonsense here." The smile on Mu Bai's face faded a lot. Now, he finally understood that Qin Yu could be so calm in front of such a strong person. How heaven-defying was that? Huarong did not treat them as equals at all. All of them were merely a bunch of ants in her eyes, the kind that she could casually slap to death. Ever since advancing to Immortal Grove, apart from in front of some major sect supreme powerhouses, he had not felt this kind of fear for many years already. Subsequently, his attitude became much more respectful. Towards Qin Yu, he was even more gentle, inviting the person into his city lord manor with a smile. Huarong's body was too big. Plus, because she was worried, she did not enter the city lord manor but watched from afar. She tried her best to restrain her power again and again. But that kind of colossus stepped on the void, a pair of eyes that seemed to be cast with flames. Just a casual glance like that would bring them a lot of pressure. After a series of tests, the little fire Chileen was indeed poisoned by that kind of strange poison. Furthermore, this poison was called Ice Holy Power. Because if one did not get close to the powerful power of fire, this kind of poison could also help increase strength, especially cultivators who were naturally closer to cold intent. It was just that if it was changed to fire power, then it would become an incurable poison. I've seen this kind of medicine before, but it's not poison. It's a kind of pill that can increase strength. So there's really no cure for this. No one can cure this kind of poison. An apothecary who was captured and studied this path quite a bit. He could not resist wiping the cold sweat on his head weakly. Chapter 889. Under the gaze of such a powerful expert, he did not even have the chance to breathe. Huarong tried to restrain herself, but in the end, she couldn't resist the urge to kill that pharmacist. Don't be too agitated, this poison is not completely incurable. As long as you use a special method to neutralize it, you won't have to worry about it anymore. As soon as he said that, everyone's gaze fell on Qin Yu. The little fire Chileen was still sleeping peacefully and was unwilling to leave Qin Yu's embrace. Huarong's heart ached when she saw this. She had gone through so much to give birth to this child. Who knew that a despicable and shameless human would take her child away when she was weak during labor? In a moment of anger, her other child was not saved during labor. Although she had found her child, it was not close to her at all and was only clinging to another person. However, she still listened attentively to what method could be used to neutralize this special poison. "I'm afraid you'll have to do it yourself." Huarong was slightly stunned. "Me? But didn't you say that you'll act alone as soon as I get close?" Of course, Qin Yu did not want Huarong to get close. Asking for her help and getting close were two completely different things. The two had nothing to do with each other. Huarong was the most powerful person in Changju City. Moreover, the one who tied the bell should untie it. Think carefully about who poisoned you. It's definitely not the person who stole the little fire Chileen from you. I've already seen that person and he's already dead. He's definitely not that powerful. Not to mention the poison he concocted, even if he got close, he would definitely be poisoned. However, there's no poison in his body. Therefore, the person who poisoned her must be someone else. Thinking about the cause and effect of the incident, it seemed that only someone related to the Fire Chileen clan could poison her. Moreover, the poison was almost completely targeted at the Fire Chileen. If she thought about it further, the reason why the little Fire Chileen was stolen might have been intentional. That person would be scared out of his wits over such a small matter. He would not have the guts to steal her child right under the Fire Chileen's nose. Mu Bai Huarong suddenly realized that there was indeed something fishy about this matter. If there wasn't anything fishy, how could everything be so coincidental? How could an ordinary person know that the Fire Chileen was about to give birth at such a crucial time? After all, it was a divine beast. For something as serious as giving birth, she would definitely find an absolutely safe place. Ordinary humans would find it difficult to even get close, let alone enter. If the thief was powerful and had some relationship with them, Then everything would make sense. Huarong thought for a long time and really thought of such a person. A person who had both the motive and the strength to do all this. Damn it. She was so angry that she wanted to seek revenge immediately. At the same time, she carefully wanted to look at her child again. Leave the little fire Qilin with me for now. When Mu Bai saw this, he quickly stood out. This was an important opportunity to build a good relationship with the divine beast fire Qilin. He wouldn't dream of keeping the little fire Qilin as his pet. However, he had to establish a good relationship with an adult fire Qilin. Not to mention anything else, even if the other party owed him a favor, he would have profited greatly from this. However, Huarong wasn't willing at all, even if he was the one who was rushing her. In the end, her gaze fell on Qin Yu. I can feel that you are different from others, and my child is also close to you. So I will temporarily entrust the child to you. Remember, his name is Qi Yang. Huarong finally looked at Qi Yang reluctantly. She could only leave quickly with tears and anger in her eyes. She went to find the enemy who made her mature and painful. Qi Yang seemed to have sensed something and struggled in Qin Yu's arms. He opened his eyes and finally fell asleep peacefully. When Mu Bai saw this scene, he was very envious. He also wanted to go and get the little fire Qilin. This was the future divine beast fire Qilin. When it was young, it had a mother by its side to take care of it. When it grew up, it would be an overlord. Looking at Huarong's strength, it would be at least the strength of a holy king when it grew up. What city Lord Mu said before, can you continue to fulfill your promise now? Qin Yu blocked his line of sight without leaving a trace. Mu Bai couldn't help but touch his nose. Then, he ordered people to start preparing. Now that he thought about it, he had promised a lot of things just now. For example, some things for the little fire Qilin, and some high-quality spiritual items for the little fire Qilin to eat. These were all things that he had promised to Huarong personally. If he went back on his word at the last minute, Huarong would definitely tear down Baisha city when she returned. Although it looked small, it was a divine beast after all. The scales on its body were already quite heavy. The little fire Qilin's weight was not heavy. If it were an ordinary person, their hands would have long been sore after holding it for so long. But from the beginning to the end, Qin Yu's expression was normal. On the one hand, he had promised to take good care of this little guy. On the other hand, this little guy was not willing to let go at all. It clung to his arms tightly. If he forced his hands to let go, those sharp claws would hook onto his clothes and not be willing to go down. She continued to cry. Otherwise, why would people say that comparisons are odious? Mu Bai looked on enviously from the side. But no matter what he did, he couldn't bring the little fire Qilin to his side. Even if the little fire Qilin's identity as a divine beast was excluded, it still looked very mighty and beautiful. Unfortunately, no matter what he did, he couldn't make the little guy look at him, not even once. This was probably because of the previous few incidents that made the little fire Qilin lose its sense of security. It was also because of the dragon aura on his body that the little fire Qilin didn't treat him as one of those despicable people who had captured him. If it were anyone else, the little fire Qilin would not be outdone and would directly scratch that person. Although the divine beast was still young and was only a cub, its strength had already begun to show. Only the dragon soul could barely carry the little fire Qilin to the side. But if it wasn't careful, the little fire Qilin would still slip to Qin Yu's side. It tried to climb up and find a comfortable place to curl up. Qin Yu pulled the little fire Qilin down expressionlessly. The clothes on his body were torn apart. Although the divine beast was still young, it was indeed not to be underestimated. Especially when it was ignorant and didn't know how strong it was, it went around causing trouble. Chapter 890. After being reprimanded, the little fire Qilin became much more well-behaved. However, it still followed Qin Yu closely. Why don't you let me spend some time alone with this little guy? If you can do it, I can tell you some inside information about the exchange in private. This should be your first time here. Don't you want to know? Mu Bai felt his heart itch as he watched from the side. If there was no comparison, perhaps he would feel better. However, the fire Qilin's attitude towards Qin Yu was too different from how it treated them. That was why he couldn't bear it and even took the initiative to negotiate. He really couldn't bear it any longer. He was the city lord of White Sand City, and all those who came to participate in the exchange would all be killed. Even the disciples of the big sects wanted to have a good relationship with him, so that they could be of help to him or form a good relationship with him. However, Qin Yu was different. He had never seen someone like Qin Yu. Not to mention building a good relationship with him, he was cold and indifferent. It was as if he was just an ordinary person and not a respected city lord or a powerful immortal spirit realm expert. Qin Yu still gave an ambiguous answer. City Lord Mu can do it yourself. As long as Qi Yang agrees. If Qi Yang agreed, would he need to take the initiative to come here? Mu Bai was so angry that he almost crushed his favorite purple gold gourd into pieces. It was because he really had no other choice that he came here. However, Qin Yu's attitude was still the same as before. There was no change in it. What do you want? I've made concessions to you time and time again. It's not because I'm afraid of you. Mu Bai's left hand formed a claw and emitted faint yellow smoke. Suddenly, without any warning, it attacked Qin Yu's throat. Mu Bai was directly sent flying. This time, he only used 30% of his strength. However, that was not something that a profound immortal could take. Even an immortal soul realm expert would have to pay a price if he wanted to take this attack. For a moment, his eyes were filled with disbelief. Then, all the disbelief disappeared with a smile. It was as if he had never made a move, nor did he have any ill intentions. Heroes indeed come from the young. To think that there's actually such an extraordinary person like you in this world. Where did you learn from? Mu Bai wanted to sound him out. He didn't believe that such a talented person didn't have a master. He wondered which almighty being was able to teach such an outstanding disciple. He even used the pretense of coming from the lower realm. Previously, he had been deceived very hard. You think too much. I'm not the disciple of some expert from a large sect, nor am I deliberately concealing my identity to go out and train. Mu Bai refused to believe it. He didn't believe that such a talented person wouldn't be discovered, nor would he be the disciple of some expert. Even he could tell at a glance how outstanding the others were. He didn't believe that no one could tell that this was a good seedling. As long as he was nurtured a little, it was hard to say who would be more valuable in the future. However, his repeated interrogations did not yield any results. He had no choice but to give up on his idea. No matter what kind of inside story there was, it had nothing to do with him. However, it was still very embarrassing to lose to someone who was so much weaker than him. He wanted to stop him and talk about the matter that he had brought up previously. Then I'll have to trouble you. Mu Bai's discomfort was quickly pushed to the back of his mind. As for the inside story of the exchange meeting, it was actually just that. Which sect had some personal relationships with which sect? Which sect maintained peace with which sect? But in private, they had already fought for hundreds of times. The most important thing was the real purpose of the exchange. When the exchange was first established, it was actually to distribute resources. Whoever's representative could win in the end and get a good ranking, the force under his name would get a large amount of resources. Although Baixia City was the host city of this exchange, they still had to send people to participate. Moreover, there was an unwritten rule that those in the immortal spirit realm couldn't participate in the exchange, so he could only be a judge. However, there were many other things that he could do besides this. Don't underestimate me. Do you want me to go easy on you, and arrange for you to be in the front? Or should I just arrange a few weaker opponents for you? Qin Yu smiled and looked at him for a while. With his strength, why would he need to arrange for weaker opponents? Since the immortal spirit realm wasn't going to fight, then all the participants were no threat to him. He was curious about the immortal spirit realm, and he had some respect for it. However, if it was an ordinary immortal spirit realm cultivator, then forget about it. It wasn't like there weren't any immortal spirits that died at his hands. Only then did Mu Bai realize what a stupid thing he had said. Even when he attacked with 30% of his strength, it didn't do much to Qin Yu, and it was easily blocked. If it was an ordinary immortal spirit realm cultivator, what could they do to Qin Yu? If he really changed his opponent to someone weaker, then it would be a humiliation. Not only would he not be able to do him a favor, he might even become enemies. He could only smile and change the topic. He then talked about some of the inner workings of the big sects, and completely changed the topic. The exchange was right in front of them, and the matter of the powerful fire Cheline suddenly descending and turning the city upside down. It had already been made into countless stories that were passed down in Baisha city. Especially the young man who appeared later and stepped forward bravely, easily resolving all the dangers. He was extremely famous. Many people knew that now that the exchange was right in front of them, it was very unlikely that Qin Yu was just passing by. It was more likely that he was here to participate in the exchange. However, no one knew which city Qin Yu was representing. Which sect? Now that the exchange was right in front of them, more people were paying attention to these stories. The main character of the story, however, walked slowly and unhurriedly in the direction of the exchange. Mu Bai had to take charge of the situation from start to finish, so he went ahead first. The passers-by were in a hurry, and a large portion of them were there to join in the fun. Only a small portion of them would be able to have a place for themselves in the exchange. In the end, the crowd became very crowded. Even in the sky, there were quite a few people walking on the void. Of course, walking in the air consumed a lot of energy. If it wasn't for the fact that there were so many people on the ground, there wouldn't be so many people in the air. Chapter 891. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A white dragon appeared out of nowhere. In the blink of an eye, it ran away from the crowd, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. They stared dumbfoundedly in the direction the white dragon left. That seems to be the location of the conference. Did any of you notice that someone was standing on top of that white dragon's head? How is that possible? Dragons are prideful by nature. There's no way they'd be willing to be a mount. The crowd only paused for a moment. After all, time waits for no one. However, the news of White Dragon's sudden emergence from the crowd still spread throughout Baisha city in a short period of time. Some said that the White Dragon was just passing by, while others said that it had gone to the conference to watch the show. Others said that the White Dragon was actually the pet of some sect's super expert. It had been hiding from the world for a long time, so no one knew about it. Now that the conference was in full swing, it had come out to take a look. When the White Dragon appeared, Mu Bai was startled, thinking that it was another farce like the Fire Cheline incident. He hurried over, only to realize that the White Dragon wasn't that strong. When he got closer, he saw the White Dragon clearly. When he saw the two people standing on top of the White Dragon head, his eyes widened and his face was filled with disbelief. Then, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. Even if they wanted to steal the Fire Cheline, he had to accept his fate. Some things shouldn't belong to him, so he shouldn't think too much about it. However, seeing that Qin Yu now had another divine beast bloodline by his side, Mu Bai couldn't help but feel bitter. He possessed such strength and was the lord of a city with a noble status. Yet, he didn't even have a decent pet beast. On the other hand, Qin Yu was so much younger than him, yet he was shockingly talented. Mu Bai couldn't help but be envious of his luck. If Mu Bai were like most people, with greed in his heart, he wouldn't hesitate to use his strength to force Qin Yu to hand over his pet beast. He might even kill him for his possessions. But now that many people knew about this, if Mu Bai were to make a move, he would be putting himself in grave danger. He might even become the target of the various sects. Hence, Mu Bai knew what was more important. Soon, a sincere smile appeared on his face. "You've come at the right time. Now that the exchange is about to begin, I've specially prepared a seat for you. Go and take a look. If there's anything that doesn't fit, tell me immediately. I'll get someone to change it for you." Arlong just carried Qin Yu to the place. Although the social gathering was built in a very large area, it was still very spacious. However, his body was 1,000 feet long. Waiting here was too eye-catching. Moreover, there was no place for him. Once he reached his destination, he would naturally return. The sudden disappearance of a relatively strong dragon caused another round of discussion. The envy in Mu Bai's eyes grew even more intense. However, since he was able to become the city lord, He had always been able to keep a poker face. Soon, he led her to one of the few seats at the front with a smile. This was the position that he had specially arranged for them. Being near the front also meant that they were of noble status. He was the city lord, so arranging for Qin Yu to sit in the front was a piece of cake. No one would say anything to him about this matter. It seemed that Mu Bai had told him yesterday that sitting in the front was extremely rare. No one dared to provoke those who could sit in the front, and they all had a certain level of fame and strength. However, he had just arrived, so how could he have any fame? Even if his strength was sufficient, there were very few people who knew him. No matter how he thought about it, the front seat shouldn't have been given to him. Perhaps seeing through Qin Yu's thoughts, Mu Bai was about to open his mouth and talk about how difficult it was for him to get the front seat for him. Hence, before he could say anything, Qin Yu and the dragon soul directly occupied the two seats over there. There were no emotions as he had imagined. Not to mention joy and nervousness, even the nervousness that he had imagined. Not a single trace of it. It was as if that seat originally belonged to them. Mu Bai's face stiffened. Once again, he couldn't keep a straight face in front of Qin Yu and revealed some clues. City Lord Mu, don't you have to attend to your own matters? Qin Yu looked to the side. There were a few people waving at Mu Bai. Obviously, they had something to ask him to go over. Of course, I still have some things to do. You sit here first. If there's anything you're not used to, forget it, just pretend that I didn't say that. In any case, he didn't see anything that Qin Yu was not used to. He was much more used to it than he had imagined. For a moment, he even felt a little absent-minded, as if that seat was originally Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul's seat, and he wanted to take advantage of this nod to get some benefits. However, he quickly came back to his senses. Obviously, things shouldn't have turned out like this. He originally wanted to use this matter to ask for a favor. One of his most common methods was to establish good relations with people with boundless futures in advance. Even geniuses had the probability of dying young. However, as long as he made friends with enough people, there would always be a portion of the geniuses who owed him a favor in the end. Even if they didn't do anything for him, they would still have to be polite to him and treat him with respect. However, this was the first time that he tried to worm his way into being friends with someone, but failed. Even Mu Bai was a little absent-minded when he left. People gradually arrived one after another, but only the front row was not full. Especially the few seats next to Qin Yu, there was not a single person. From time to time, there would be whispers. Isn't that the place where the immortals sit? I also remember that there should be immortals sitting there, but why is there a stranger sitting there now? Do any of you remember who this person is? Could it be that I forgot? I don't know either. As time went by, the other places were all filled with people. Only the seats in the front that represented status had not been taken. One had to know that the exchange meetings were often full. Especially the seats in the front, it was impossible for there to be any vacancies. They would only be fought over. But now, no one had gone over. Qin Yu sat there alone. He closed his eyes to rest. Suddenly, a prying gaze swept over. It was directly blocked by one eye. He casually set up layers of barriers, making it impossible for people to see clearly. Puff. Not far away, the white-bearded old man spat out a mouthful of blood. Unexpectedly, he was injured by the rebounding attack, which was neither light nor serious. This kid is actually so strong. There were a few people standing beside the white-bearded old man, and judging from their auras, they were at least peak immortal souls. Seeing this mouthful of blood, their evaluation of Qin Yu improved a lot. This was a person that they needed to be wary of. Just 15 minutes before the exchange meeting was about to start, the few immortals who had arrived late finally revealed themselves. Chapter 892. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. He seemed to have come from afar and was approaching them step by step, bringing great pressure to everyone present. Everyone could not help but sigh. He was indeed an immortal monarch. Qin Yu was still sitting in his seat without moving. In the exchange, he was not representing himself, but the entire Cloud Immortal City. Hence, there was no need to say anything to these unrelated people. The immortal monarchs arrived one after another and sat in their seats. Only one of them had an ashen expression because his seat had been moved to the back. Speaking of which, this was not a big deal. However, Qin Yu was in front of him, which made him extremely unhappy. "Why don't you and I exchange seats? I think that side is more suitable for you." Although he said so, the white-bearded elder did not have any intention to negotiate. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand. It seemed to be thrown casually, but there was a powerful force hidden in it. If an ordinary mystic immortal received it, his internal organs would definitely be damaged and he would die. "What if I don't agree?" Qin Yu stretched out his hand. He activated the Azure Dragon technique. The ethereal horsetail whisk suddenly exploded. It turned into countless fragments and scattered in all directions. Each fragment carried the white-bearded elder's hidden force, which was extremely powerful. It didn't take long for the surroundings to be in an extremely sorry state. Everything was in utter chaos. Only Qin Yu and the area behind him were truly clean. There was not the slightest bit of debris. This move caused the white-bearded old man to be greatly shocked. Not only was his purpose exposed in front of everyone, which made him lose face. Also, there was this sudden explosion. Everyone who was injured would probably come to find trouble with him. Even if he did not say anything, his reputation would have fallen to the bottom. Bai thought to himself. He was still a little worried. After all, he saw it clearly. The force contained in the ethereal horsetail whisk was definitely more than 70% of Immortal Monarch Bai Shu's strength. His purpose was to beat Qin Yu to the point where he would never be able to recover. However, he did not expect to make such a big mistake at the crucial moment. However, this was also a reflection of Qin Yu's strength. "Are you done playing? If not, at least wait until the exchange begins." The other immortal monarchs were shocked. At this moment, they also reacted quickly and laughed heartily. It was as if this incident had never happened. "You're too impatient. After the exchange begins, there will be opportunities for you and this young friend to learn from each other." "That's right. Since we're all sitting in the cloud Immortal Monarch Bai Shu's, we Immortal Monarch Bai Shu." Immortal Monarch Bai Shu, and returned to his seat. But looking at Qin Yu, Immortal Monarch Bai Shu. By Immortal Monarch Bai Shu, he had never imagined that things would turn out this way. Immortal Monarch Bai Yuns, by Immortal Monarch by Immortal by Monarch translation by Shu by Monarch translation Shu translation is Immortal by Immortal translation. It is to kill translation. To Liu is I do that disguise that Discu's exchange was still going on as usual. The mess caused by the small episode just now was quickly cleaned up. But when the exchange was held, the time was slightly delayed. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but look at Qin Yu and Immortal Monarch Bai Shu, who had made such a big scene just now. Suddenly, they realized that the couple seemed to have disappeared. But if they sensed carefully, they could still find that there was someone there. In the end, they had no choice but to look at Immortal Monarch Bai Shu. Immortal Monarch Bai Shu now understood what it meant to feel uneasy. Those gazes were like sharp needles. They directly pierced into the flesh on his back. But no matter how he tried to isolate himself, he couldn't isolate those things, and he couldn't be seen in other places. He could only bear these gazes from different people. He was so ashamed that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. Sure enough, he should have used all his strength just now. He shouldn't have held back at all. Even if he would be criticized, he couldn't care less. The exchange had just begun. He couldn't help but stand up and challenge Qin Yu. Of course, on the surface, it was Rising Sun Palace and Cloud Immortal City exchanging pointers. But in reality, no one could tell. This exchange was called as an exchange, but it was just Immortal Monarch Bai Shu wanting to vent his anger. Qin Yu wasn't afraid at all. Under the situation where everyone was guessing how he would admit defeat, he stood in the middle of the stage. "I'll let you make 3 moves first. Since it's an exchange of pointers, of course, it can't end at the beginning. Otherwise, Rising Sun Palace wouldn't look good." As soon as he said that, Immortal Monarch Bai Shu couldn't take such humiliation anymore. Under the situation where no one said anything, he flew onto the stage. The horsetail whisk that he always carried with him appeared in his hand. He waved it over on the spot with great strength. There was the sound of something breaking through the air. It kept exploding in his ears. Waves of oppressive sensations were pressing down on Qin Yu didn't dodge or avoid it. Just as it was about to get close, he moved his feet slightly and dodged it easily. This was a fatal blow. Immortal Monarch Bai Shu was even more furious when his attack didn't hit. You dare to let me make 3 moves first? Within 3 moves, you'll definitely lose. Qin Yu still didn't move and there was a relaxed smile on his face. He stood steadily with his hands behind his back. There was a slight breeze. His robe fluttered gently. Immortal Monarch Bai Shu's eyes were red because of his anger. The knuckles of his hand that was holding the horsetail whisk started to turn green. You're actually so arrogant. Then, take this. Rising sun, scorching sun. Asahi Yuruka. The white horsetail whisk drew a few strokes in the air. The dazzling orange light formed a huge ball of light, just like a small sun that was just born. Before anyone could react, this berserk energy directly smashed toward Qin Yu. Ha 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 ha, go and die. No one can withstand this move of mine. You actually want to take 3 of my moves. Now, you can't even take 2 of my moves. Mu Bai's heart kept sinking. No matter how talented he was, under such a powerful crisis, he would probably die prematurely. But at that time, he couldn't react in time. Even if he wanted to, he was powerless. Rumble. It wasn't easy to fight on the battle stage in the air. There were countless cracks on it. This was the full strength of an immortal monarch's attack. But not long after, the battle stage slowly recovered. The cracks were slowly mended. After the dust gradually settled, a figure stood proudly like a jade bamboo. Qin Yu stepped out of the dust and stood in front of Immortal Monarch Bai Shu. There's only one move left. I'm going to fight back. Chapter 893. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Arrogant, too arrogant. White Rainbow. World Annihilation. I don't believe that you can come out unscathed. When the other immortal monarchs sensed this enormous energy, their expressions changed drastically. Mu Bai stood up from the city lord's seat. He leaped up. He arrived in front of the ball of light that contained the enormous destructive energy. He used all his strength. Only then did he manage to block the enormous destructive energy at the last moment. Are you crazy? No matter how angry he was, this was an exchange after all. He could not be so obvious. However, not only did he make it extremely obvious on the surface, he even used such a powerful killing move. Even if he used up all the power of the immortal monarch, even if he used all his strength, he would still have to pay a huge price to use such a powerful attack. Mu Bai didn't have the time to stop them, and the consequence of that was that many of the people present would be killed or injured. Although Bai Shu Immortal Monarch's strength wasn't at the peak of perfection, he was still one of the best. This was the trump card that he had kept hidden for many years. Few people knew that his strength was comparable to an immortal. After he calmed down, he still did not suffer any damage. There was not a speck of dust on his body, and even his eyes were still calm. Immortal Lord Bai Shu felt cold when he saw Qin Yu. Immortal Monarch Bai Shu suddenly felt as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water on him. He looked at the mess around him and then looked at his hands in disbelief. However, he did not regret it. He was just shocked. Why was he still unable to kill Qin Yu on the spot even after taking out his trump card? Are you going to stop me? Don't forget that you are just the city lord here. Although you are in charge of the exchange and it is held in your territory, it does not mean that you can speak to me like this. Although Mu Bai wanted to curry favor with those big sects, he would not allow anyone to humiliate him like this. The difference in strength between the two of them was so obvious. Immortal Lord Bai Shu was already in a sorry state. He had to use all his strength one after another. Now, he did not have much strength left. Yet, he still showed such an attitude. He was not even willing to show any effort on the surface. He directly humiliated Immortal Lord Bai Shu. Since I can't do anything about it, then I'll let this exchange of pointers continue. He knew better than anyone else that immortal Lord Bai Shu was not an easy person to get along with. Although such a huge force swept the entire place, immortal Lord Bai Shu, who was in the center of the force, did not show any fear. Immortal Lord Bai Shu was indifferent from the beginning. Although he had already thought of how to face all of this, and he might have even thought that such a thing might happen from the very beginning, he did not expect it to happen. Mu Bai Shu. Immortal Lord Bai Shu. If he said he wouldn't care about this matter, then he really wouldn't care about this matter. Immortal Lord Bai Shu. Immortal Lord Bai Shu. Immortal Lord Bai Shu was Immortal Lord Bai Shu. Was Immortal Lord Bai Shu? Since Immortal Lord Bai Shu was Immortal Lord Bai Shu, Immortal Lord Shu Immortal Translation Immortal Translation Immortal Translation Immortal Lord, Immortal Translation. But it was impossible for him to give up. There was Immortal S, otherwise, he would lose face as an Immortal Lord. Would he take the initiative to admit defeat to someone who was much weaker than him? Since the cultivation realm was there was no room for him to regret. Now that the 3 moves have passed, let me see what you have. Could it be that you were so full of yourself before, but now you can't show me your strength? The cultivation realm was there. Even if there were a small number of people who had the strength to challenge those of a higher cultivation realm, those people were very rare. That kind of genius, all the big sects would fight to recruit. If he was really a genius and was extremely famous, Immortal Lord Bai Shu would have heard of him before. After carefully pondering for a while and confirming that he had never seen Qin Yu before and did not know of such a person, Immortal Monarch Bai Shu became even bolder. Immortal Lord Bai Shu was not as embarrassed and angry as before. Drinking Dragon Sword. A bright silver light flashed. Lin Xuanyu could not help but stand up. Previously, he was knocked down by such a sudden attack and embarrassed in front of everyone. Now, this move was used on other Immortal Lords. If Immortal Lord Bai Shui was defeated this time, it would be fine. If Immortal Lord Bai Shu was not affected, wouldn't he be reduced to a laughingstock? However, he didn't want to see his enemy win either. He was angry and hateful, but he still made up his mind that after this exchange, he would not let Qin Yu go back safely. Mad Dragon. The 4th move of Dragon Slaying Chant. Qin Yu was able to easily learn the first 3 moves. However, for the 4th move, he had to spend several days before he could learn it. It was almost the sum of the first 3 moves. Of course, the power was also extremely extraordinary. Lin Xuanyu thought it was a surprise this time. However, he was soon surprised. That bright white light suddenly transformed into a long, proud dragon as it neared him. But it quickly disappeared completely. Immortal Lord Bai Shu fell down. Then, when he was on the ground, his eyes were closed and he spat out blood. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Bai Shu. Senior brother. A few people quickly came out from the platform inside and stayed beside Immortal Lord Bai Shu. After a careful examination, they found that he was only seriously injured and fainted. He was not dead for the time being, so they were slightly relieved. But soon, their faces turned ugly. Because although he was not dead, he was not far from dying. Immortal Lord Bai Shu was seriously injured and almost incurable. If they wanted to save such a seriously injured and dying person, they did not know how much resources they would need. Moreover, even if they saved him in the end, his strength would definitely regress. For a moment, everyone had different thoughts. Immortal Lord Bai Shu was not without enemies. There were many people who wanted him to live a bad life. This time, it was just a little trick without leaving a trace. It was simply too easy. TSK, this is too ruthless. At this moment, there are already 3 people who have done it at the same time. If a while more, he really can't be saved. Each of them actually used a highly toxic poison. If it is not to cripple him, it is to turn him into an idiot. Originally, it was already difficult to cure one person. Now, so many different poisons were used at the same time. At that time, even if he was saved, he would be completely crippled. Other than gasping for breath, he would not be able to do anything else. Not to mention the Immortal Lord, he would probably become a laughingstock. How could Mu Bai, who was the strongest person present, not notice it? He did not do anything. Qin Yu also did not take the initiative to remind him. Chapter 894. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Just now, that person wanted to kill him, so why should he take the initiative to go over? One-Eyed originally wanted to watch the show, but now that he didn't see anything interesting, he felt a little bored and shrank back. A large group of people gathered around Immortal Monarch Bai Shu. They looked at Qin Yu unkindly, but they were concerned about Mu Bai. They didn't make a move immediately. From the looks of it, I wanted to see if you would do something. Mu Bai sneered and didn't remind them. If they really wanted to target Qin Yu, he would silently burn a few incense sticks for them in his heart. How could a person who could easily defeat an immortal monarch without hesitation be so simple? If they were to truly consider Qin Yu as a simple character, then each and every one of them would end up like Bai Shu Immortal Monarch. Hurry up and take him away. I don't think he's in a good condition now. It was more than just not in a good condition. Now that he had so many drugs in his body, if he couldn't get rid of all the toxins in a short time, from then on, he would only be a cripple. However, Mu Bai kept remembering Qin Yu's clean attack just now, and Immortal Monarch Bai Shu's insolence just now. Therefore, no one reminded him. If he did, it wouldn't be worth it to offend a rising genius like Qin Yu. Moreover, he was happy to see this happen. A part of the front row that belonged to the Immortal Monarchs was emptied. Lin Xuanyu wasn't among them. He and Immortal Monarch Bai Shu were just acquaintances. Immortal Monarch Bai Shu was older and more experienced, so he didn't care much about rising juniors like them. Lin Xuanyu didn't go up to him. He didn't know when he would be labeled as someone who deliberately approached him with ulterior motives. This wasn't an isolated incident. Let's continue with the exchange. What happened just now was just a small interlude. Everyone, return to your seats. As long as everyone follows the rules, I don't think the previous incident will happen again. Mu Bai's words had a hidden meaning. After this, no one paid much attention to Qin Yu's seat, afraid that they would be the next unlucky one. After this incident, no one dared to take the initiative to challenge Qin Yu. Instead, they sparred with each other within their own sect. Among them, there were also small cities like the Cloud Immortal City that had always been unknown and did not stand out. Qin Yu had fewer opportunities to fight, so he focused on watching the others fight. After all, those who dared to challenge him were all people with some strength. The sparring was quite exciting to watch. On the other hand, the soul-shocking commotion from before didn't appear again, and it was even to the extent that most of the battles were between the mysterious immortals themselves. It wasn't that there weren't any immortal soul realm cultivators sparring with each other, but they all stopped after a certain point. None of them went overboard. Looks like I was really unlucky before. What a coincidence, I bumped into someone who tried to kill me. Compared to other people, his movements were much gentler. Every time, he would not overdo it and would never go overboard. If someone went a little overboard, such as accidentally cutting a few wounds on the opponent's body, they would immediately stop and apologize. After that, they would continue to maintain a peaceful facade. It was just like what Mu Bai said at the start. The purpose of the exchange was to exchange pointers. Although there were fights in the open and in the dark, they were all done in private. Since it was said to be a spar, it was a spar. Very few people would directly kill in public. Because not only would that smear his own reputation, but it would also smear the reputation of the faction behind him. Not long after, someone challenged Lin Xuanyu of the Profound Heaven sect. He was already an immortal soul realm cultivator. Those who dared to challenge him had to at least be in the immortal soul realm. Lin Xuanyu didn't show any signs of panic from the start to the end. This person was also an old rival of his. He came from Hegemon God Lin. His bronze-colored skin made him look extremely valiant. He was 8 feet tall, and his muscles were bulging. Compared to Lin Xuanyu's skinny body, they were two extremes. But when the two of them stood on the same stage, their auras were on par. Please. Lin Xuanyu took a step back, looking extremely polite. Many female cultivators couldn't help but let out soft screams. All sorts of praises were being said in private. Although they were all whispering, when there were too many people talking, it became noisy. It was very easy for people to hear some of the content in their words. Other than praises, there was nothing else mixed in. Lin Xuanyu was very pleased with himself, but he didn't show it on his face. Soon, he summoned a jade flute out of thin air. It was completely white and transparent, with a faint green hue. A long tassel hung from the end of the jade flute. His opponent didn't care about these fancy moves at all. He didn't seem to move, but he directly pulled out two huge hammers from behind him. Countless rice and snow grass grew on the hammers, emitting a strong smell of blood. Even though they were separated by a great distance, Qin Yu could still smell the stench of blood and corpses. Obviously, many people had died under these hammers, and each of them had died in an extremely cruel way. This was an opponent that couldn't be underestimated. Lin Xuanyu also became much more serious. A peaceful melody suddenly sounded, but it suddenly changed in the middle, and it sounded like it was filled with killing intent. Countless melodies turned into invisible blades that charged towards the brawny man. Petty tricks. After so many years, you haven't changed at all, you only know how to play these fancy tricks. Lin Xuanyu's expression turned ugly for a moment. Then it returned to normal. Victory seemed to be in his grasp. So what if it's fancy? As long as I can defeat the enemy, that's the best method. With every step the brawny man took, the ground would shake 3 times. He seemed to have added a great amount of power to the hammers. They smashed towards Lin Xuanyu. Lin Xuanyu didn't panic at all. The melody didn't stop. One-Eyed suddenly exclaimed in surprise. This guy actually left an afterimage where he was and ran away. However, that brawny man's reputation isn't undeserved. He's already found something wrong. He didn't hide his voice, so many people heard this. They heard it clearly. Even the brawny man on the stage heard this. He immediately raised his hammers and smashed them behind him. Lin Xuanyu had no choice but to reveal himself, using the jade flute to block the 2 hammers. He suddenly retreated and attacked from another direction. His figure was like a ghost. And at the end of the jade flute, there was a short sword an inch long pointed straight at the brawny man's throat. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes, taking the lead to clap and congratulate. Chapter 895. He suddenly wanted to give it a try. Lin Xuanyu was indeed a good opponent. His successful sneak attack was partly due to luck. Now, he wanted to use real swords and spears to test out his true abilities. This battle is a bit boring. Brother Qin, why don't you come on stage with me? Lin Xuanyu's opponent hadn't even left the stage yet, but he was already provoking Qin Yu. He had been waiting for an opportunity. Now that he had won, everyone's attention was on him. If he suggested it, no one would be able to refuse. Unless he wanted to become the target of everyone. This was a sparring session. But it was normal. Even if he wanted to dodge, he didn't think Qin Yu would be able to. He didn't expect Qin Yu to want to spar with him as well. That would be great. With a light tap of his toes, Qin Yu lands directly on the stage. At this moment, the big guy is still standing on the stage, unwilling to leave. He stared at Lin Xuanyu like a beast. Sooner or later, I will defeat you fair and square. This is just a spar. I will definitely have a good fight with you in a secluded place some other day until the real victor is decided. Actually, he had the chance to block Lin Xuanyu's attack. Even if Lin Xuanyu's attack landed, he still had the chance to fight back. At least it wouldn't be fatal. To him, as long as it wasn't fatal, he wouldn't lose. So, he didn't want to accept this result. Lin Xuanyu acted like the head disciple of a big sect. The jade flute quickly disappeared from his hand. He chuckled and nodded. Then I'll definitely spar with you one day. But it was just a sparring session, not a real competition. The big guy left unwillingly. Before he left, he glanced at Qin Yu with a strange expression. In the end, he mumbled something and disappeared from the stage. He seemed to be sitting in a seat near the back. Qin Yu was relatively close to her. Adding on the fact that his ears and eyes were very sharp, he was able to hear her mumbling very clearly. This big guy was encouraging him, wanting him to defeat Lin Xuanyu in one fell swoop. Defeat him directly? That's not a bad idea. But isn't it pointless to just go up and defeat him? If it is too easy to win, wouldn't it be a lot less fun? This time, his goal was to force Lin Xuanyu to use all of his trump cards. How strong was the chief disciple of the profound heaven sect? What kind of strength could he bring out in a crisis? He was very curious. Strength and trump cards were two completely different things. If it was just a matter of deciding the victor, they would have already decided the victor. One strike was enough to kill. What else was there to say? Lin Xuanyu seemed to have completely forgotten about his public defeat. The jade flute in his hand floated with his thoughts and appeared again. I saw that when you were sparring with Bai Shu, you took the initiative to give him 3 moves. How about I let you have 3 moves this time as well? Qin Yu drew his drinking dragon sword. He didn't waste any time talking nonsense with him and approached him step by step. Then, his speed became faster and faster, reminding them that their competition had already begun. The so-called sparring had already come to an end. So, no one continued to talk nonsense here. The attack came too quickly. Lin Xuanyu couldn't react in time and was scratched a little. But the injury wasn't serious. The attack only brushed past him. With such a small wound, he could easily repair it when he returned. So, even if he saw blood, Qin Yu didn't go overboard. But that was only in the eyes of others. Seeing blood meant that he didn't have any patience. He slowly made his move bit by bit. He didn't seem to have said that he would give Qin Yu 3 moves. He directly made his move. This time, he didn't pretend to be a gentleman. He didn't play the melody slowly. Instead, he used the flute as a sword. He had noticed it before. Qin Yu had always been holding a sword in his hand. Coincidentally, his jade flute countered sword techniques. He didn't know if it was because of the jade flute. This time, the fight was extremely easy. Lin Xuanyu didn't suddenly slit his throat. The two were evenly matched. Different lights flashed countless times in the blink of an eye. It was like fireworks. Most of the lights were white and dark. In a short span of time, the two had exchanged several blows. Then, they separated. They stood in the air and stared at each other, as if trying to find a clear weakness. Although it was only for a short span of time. But it was enough for them to understand that the jade flute in Lin Xuanyu's hand countered all kinds of swords. Brother Qin is indeed extraordinary. But that's it. The gap between realms is like a natural chasm. No one can cross it. Lin Xuanyu pointed his jade flute at Qin Yu. And the angle of this attack was extremely tricky. If he used sword techniques, there was no way to dodge it. Logically speaking, at this point, he should stop to prevent anyone from getting hurt. But he didn't want to stop at all. It was rare for him to have such an opportunity to vent his anger. So what if he went a little overboard? Later, as long as he apologized and expressed his attitude, no one would pursue the matter. It was just a person sent by the small cloud immortal city. He had never heard of this small city before. In his impression, the cloud immortal city's city lord had always been trying to curry favor with the Shentian sect. Lan Shao had met him once before, so he didn't take this matter to heart at all. And wasn't the city lord the most powerful person in a city? So even if he severely injured the person and made it impossible for him to return, a small cloud immortal city didn't have the guts to find trouble with the Shentian sect. Thinking of this, there was even some malice in his eyes. And he used this opportunity to kill the person directly. The sword pierced through the person's heart. This was just an accident. The person was already dead. Even if someone wanted to pursue the matter, who would stand on the side of a dead person? Qin Yu suddenly laughed. It was as if he was laughing at his ignorance and arrogance. Who said I only know how to use swords? This is just something that I've been using for 2 to 3 months. Compared to the gentleman's sword, I prefer the decisive dragon spear. The long spear was like a dragon. It raised its head slightly and at the last moment, deflected Lin Xuanyu's sharp blade that was about to pierce through his heart. He wasn't good at using swords. He was better at using spears. Lin Xuanyu probably didn't expect someone to fight with a weapon that wasn't suitable for him. He even fought with a weapon that wasn't suitable for him. Chapter 896. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. When he was knocked away, his face was still filled with shock and disbelief. Now, all his advantages had turned into disadvantages. In terms of length, how could the jade flute compare to the spear? The longer it was, the stronger it was. Moreover, his gentle jade flute could not block the attack of the spear at all. In the end, it could only be smashed into pieces. He fell heavily to the ground and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He closed his eyes and fell unconscious. This was the second time. The second time, Qin Yu defeated someone in the immortal soul realm. He even knocked them unconscious. But this time, before the other people from the Shentian sect could quickly surround Qin Yu and accuse him, he took the initiative to walk over. He squatted down. With one slap, Lin Xuanyu's face was slapped to the side. Even the corner of his mouth was broken. "You're still pretending?" Lin Xuanyu's eyes moved slightly. His eyeballs kept rolling, but no matter what, he refused to open his eyes. Even if he was humiliated to this extent, it was better than admitting that he was not as strong as Qin Yu in front of everyone. Qin Yu did not have the patience to play tricks with him. He also did not have the patience to save face. He directly slapped the swollen half of Lin Xuanyu's face again. Lin Xuanyu could no longer keep up the act. He really spat out a mouthful of blood. There was even a tooth in the blood. The blood was forced out by him. It was just for show and did not cause any harm. But this time, he was seriously injured, and one of his teeth had fallen out. "Don't go overboard. You've already won. What else do you want? I'm from the Shentian sect." Before he could finish, the swollen half of his face was slapped again. Shentian sect. Shentian sect. Did they think they could be so arrogant just because they were from a sect? How embarrassing. He was born to dislike people like this. He did not have a good impression of these sanctimonious people. A loss was a loss, but he didn't admit it openly. Instead, he used such a despicable method to splash dirty water on him. Why didn't he go even further? He slapped himself on the body. If he were to seriously injure himself, at least that would be more convincing. Instead of persisting in doing some superficial work like he was doing now. In fact, his body wasn't injured at all. Ask yourself honestly, did I do anything to you? I'll have to trouble City Lord Mu to come and take a look. I've always followed the rules of the exchange. I've always stopped before going overboard. Mu Bai looked at Lin Xuanyu's blurry face. She couldn't even bear to look at him. However, when it came to cheating, even if it was someone from the Profound Heaven sect, he would not tolerate it. After all, it was related to his reputation. No matter how powerful the Shentian sect was, they couldn't attack him without any reason. His Baixia city had been in operation for many years, and he was not to be trifled with. After a careful examination, he nodded. Indeed, there are no injuries on Lin Xuanyu. However, there were still some injuries. The most serious one was the injury on his face. Other than losing a tooth and some red and swollen blood on his face, there were no other injuries. It was even a little too good. Under such circumstances, it could only mean that Qin Yu didn't slap his face just now. There were no injuries on Lin Xuanyu's body at all. All right. Let's not talk about what happened before. Let's just talk about how you humiliated me afterward. You actually hit me so hard and made my face look like this. Aren't you going to apologize at all? He felt a little guilty and didn't want to talk about what happened before. He wanted to just talk about it and talk about what happened after. The burning pain on his face constantly reminded him of how badly he had been beaten up. Although he didn't see his face, he could tell from Mu Bai's words that he couldn't keep his face. If he didn't take care of it properly, it would be good enough if he didn't scare people half to death when he went out, let alone being handsome. In the eyes of others and other people. It wasn't that Lin Xuanyu's injuries were unbearable to look at. It was that he looked like half a pig's head. The other half of his face was still white and clean. However, the injured half of his face was swollen and his eyes were swollen into long slits. Half a pig's head and the other half a handsome face. It looked even more strange. The other half of his face that was unscathed reminded people of his identity and his usual dashing appearance. This is the first time I've realized that the chief disciple of the Shentian sect is so ugly. To think that I thought his face was pretty good. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Let's take a look at Qin Yu and wash our eyes. Just like that, Qin Yu strangely became the focus of everyone's gazes once again. It was because the people standing beside him didn't look as handsome as he did. Of course, it was also because he defeated Lin Xuanyu in one fell swoop. Since he had both strength and Lin Xuanyu's ugly appearance sitting beside him, more and more people started to look at his face. Damn it. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have ended up like this. Lin Xuanyu gritted his teeth and a small dagger appeared in his hand. It glowed with a faint green light. Mu Bai placed his hand on Lin Xuanyu's shoulder. He had a gentle expression on his face. However, Lin Xuanyu's shoulder that was pressed down couldn't help but sink. His face became deathly pale and bean-sized beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. They slowly slid down his face. He wasn't injured at all. Reality proved that this was another interlude. It was just a small accident. In the entire exchange, there were only 2 incidents that were related to Qin Yu. All kinds of gazes fell on him. It wasn't all worship, but more fear and awe. There were also people who wanted to get close to him. However, these people couldn't easily leave their seats. If they dared to challenge him to a spar, they might be beaten up and fall to the ground in a sorry state. At that time, they would lose more than they gained and lose all their face. Therefore, although he became the center of attention, no one dared to get close to him. Qin Yu was left alone. As for those people looking at him, if he was annoyed, one eye would block those people's gazes. After that, nothing else happened. According to the usual practice, the Shentian sect would usually get a unique share. However, during the last exchange meeting, Yi Zichen had already made his move. The Shentian sect only got 2nd place. Now that Qin Yu defeated him, it was equivalent to getting his place. Chapter 897. If anyone was unconvinced, they could challenge him directly. But later on, there were people who went to challenge the 1st place, but no one challenged him, the 2nd place. The first-ranked sect had already been challenged several times. It was called a spar, but in reality, it was just a matter of ranking. But even so, no one dared to challenge the seemingly easier 2nd place. Qin Yu sat like this from the beginning to the end. In the end, he was ranked 2nd. The runner-up will receive a number of small spiritual lands, as well as the rights to mine dozens of mineral veins. Of course, there were a lot of resources, but those bits and pieces were not worth mentioning. The most important things in cultivation were spiritual lands and mineral veins. As for the 2nd place of the exchange, Quan would be able to get a lot. Although the 1st place had more points, in reality, it wasn't that much more. Moreover, all the resources obtained from the exchange were credible. At the very least, no one would fight for it for the next 100 years. Because that would mean going against all the participants of the exchange meeting. There are quite a lot of things here. No wonder Lanshaw insisted that he participate in this exchange no matter what. Moreover, he seemed to value it so much. Because the remuneration was indeed not bad. It only took him a few days to obtain so many things. Speaking of which, this could be considered a 100-fold return. In fact, even if it was 100 times, it would be more than 1,000 times more if all these resources were added together. In addition to the things he had done before, the contract had long been fulfilled, and it was more than fulfilled. You don't have to give these things to the Cloud Immortal City. You should have a part of these things, because you were the one who obtained this ranking. Even if you take 70% of it, no one in the Cloud Immortal City would dare to say anything. What role did the Cloud Immortal City play in this matter? They didn't even send a few people to do nothing. Mu Bai looked down on him from the bottom of his heart. What kind of dogshit luck did he run into to meet Qin Yu? Why wasn't the place where Qin Yu landed at? He had always been a discerning person. Moreover, his city was more developed than the Cloud Immortal City. It would definitely help him develop better. Instead of directly throwing such a good seedling like Qin Yu to the outside world like this. The resources that he could take out could be said to be a sea of resources. All kinds of resources and benefits were innumerable. In Mu Bai's heart, The Cloud Immortal City had already been labeled as a wretched place. These things. Perhaps I will take a portion of them, but that will only be a small portion. These things are of no use to me. I don't plan to stay and develop a large force. So what's the point of giving these things away? It's useless to me anyway. Mu Bai didn't think that he could be so magnanimous with such a huge amount of resources. Even if he couldn't use it all by himself, he could still do a lot of things. Who in this world would dislike having fewer resources and benefits? She didn't have enough dates. No one would generously give away resources to others just because they had too many resources that they could not use in a short period of time. Qin Yu really didn't take these things to heart. Now that the exchange meeting had ended, Yi Zichen didn't say anything. It was time for him to leave. He just didn't know where to go. These items would naturally be claimed by the people of the Cloud Immortal City, and he seemed to have to think about which direction to go. After Mu Bai found out about this, he couldn't wait to let people continue to stay. The reason was quite sufficient. Qi Yang was not willing to leave him at all. When Huarong returned, she would find her child crying and making a fuss. If there were any more problems, he wouldn't be able to bear it. If Qi Yang was taken away, it would be even worse. What you said makes sense. Mu Bai was even more energetic that day. He kept saying that there were some follow-up matters after the exchange meeting. In his heart, he was thinking about how to make him stay. It was unlikely that he would take him in as his subordinate. Although the time they spent together was very short. He was very clear about Qin Yu's arrogance in his heart. If he wanted to make him stay for a long time, he had to think about it carefully. Seeing through his thoughts, Qin Yu decisively rejected him. If I want to improve my strength, I naturally can't be trapped in a small place. I won't stay in a certain place for too long, especially when there's no point for me to stay here. By the way, do you know of Shen Tian? Of course, he still had some regrets. But it was more of an epiphany. Not being trapped in a small place seemed to be a great help in improving one's strength. When he heard the last sentence, Mu Bai was a little confused. Are you asking about the current sect leader of Shen Tian sect, Sage Shen Tian? As expected, there was still no news. Qin Yu had already expected such an outcome. Now that he heard it, he wasn't surprised at all. As for the so-called Sage Shen Tian, he wasn't interested in it at all. Above the Sage King was the Sage Monarch. But Senzun could crush 100 Sage Monarchs working together. This so-called Sage Shen Tian and Sage Shen Tian Senzun couldn't be compared at all. Lin Xuanyu was beaten into a pig's head. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He almost smashed the jade flute that he used to like the most. If it wasn't for the jade flute making a mistake at the crucial moment, he wouldn't have been able to withstand that fierce attack. How would he have embarrassed himself in front of so many people? He had lost so much face. But this jade flute was a gift from his master to help him advance to the immortal soul stage. Lin Xuanyu suddenly felt a sense of grievance when he saw this warm and translucent jade flute. If you don't let me live well, I won't let you live well either. Immediately, he took out a jade pendant from his bosom. There were extremely profound and dark patterns on it. He directly crushed it. The powder formed a complete circle in the air. Through this complete circle, he seemed to be able to see another place. In another faraway sect, a blue-robed daoist with a ruddy complexion appeared. Why did you suddenly think of contacting me? Didn't we agree that unless there was something urgent, you weren't to use this method to contact me? Lin Xuanyu immediately began to complain to his master. He had already been beaten into such a state. Moreover, his Shen Tian sect's reputation was almost completely lost. Of course, such an important matter had to be quickly notified. Moreover, this could be considered an extremely urgent matter. After understanding the whole story, he looked at his pig-headed face. Spirit Lord Tongshuan's expression darkened. Someone actually dares to humiliate my Shen Tian sect. It seems like he needs to be taught a lesson. Wait there. I'll be there soon. Then, he closed the emergency call. Chapter 898. Less than half an hour had passed. Spirit Lord Tongshen had already arrived in Baixia City. If he had to rush over at such a speed, It would have been extremely exhausting for him. Anyone who dares to offend the Shentian sect will not be spared. Lin Xuanyu sensed that his master had arrived and immediately stood up to welcome him. He told the story from beginning to end without any embellishment, but he avoided the important points and the trivial points. It was easy to find out what had happened. Spirit Lord Tongxian only needed to ask a few people and he would be able to obtain the complete story. Therefore, he did not hide anything. However, if he ignored a part of the story and only mentioned what he wanted Spirit Lord Tongxian to know, it was not that difficult. Even if his intentions were to be exposed, no one would say anything about it. After all, what he said was the truth. How dare he be so arrogant? Where is he now? I must let him know that the Shentian sect is not a sect he can offend. Spirit Lord Tongxian did not care much about his disciple. However, he had always valued the reputation of the sect. Not only did he hear that someone looked down on the Shentian sect. Even if he heard someone say something bad about the Shentian sect, he would show his authority on the spot. He would show the might of the Shentian sect. The Shentian sect was a reputable sect in the entire immortal realm. They had been around for tens of thousands of years and had a strong foundation. Qin Yu suddenly felt a strong sense of malice descending. Although it didn't have any effect on him, this malice also meant that some existence had its eyes on him. Moreover, this person was slightly stronger than Mu Bai. Why would such a powerful person target him for no reason? He thought about what had happened at the exchange. There were only two people who could attract such a powerful expert. Immortal Lord Bai Shu or Lin Xuanyu. The latter was more likely. After all, the former was severely injured and could not even take care of himself. Not to mention attracting powerful experts to cause trouble for him. They are really restless. I thought that the Shentian sect had something to do with Master. That's why they did not kill him. Who knew that they would attract such a powerful expert? It could be said that he was quite shameless. Qin Yu was still alone in the city lord's mansion. If someone really came looking for him, he would just go up and greet them. Spirit Lord Tongxian left without hesitation. In a flash, he brought Lin Xuanyu to the sky above the city lord mansion. Opening his mouth slightly, Zhongxian channeled his energy into his dantian, and his voice echoed throughout the entire Baixia city. You are the one who provoked my profound heaven sect. No matter how talented a Xian immortal is, he still has to respect his seniors. Mu Bai stood out with a gloomy expression. This was what he hated the most about the profound heaven sect. They were very protective of their own people. He had clearly seen what had happened earlier. It was Lin Xuanyu who had provoked him first, and he had also attacked him first. They wanted to injure him just because they were stronger. He had seen the fatal blow more clearly than anyone else. How could he have the nerve to find Spirit Lord Tongxian, who was even stronger? However, his kind words did not have any effect. Instead, he was pushed to the side. For a moment, he was both anxious and annoyed. As the city lord, when had he ever suffered such grievances? All the other sects treated him with respect. Only the profound heaven sect was the most arrogant and did not take him, the city lord, seriously. He was not from a small sect like the Cloud Immortal City. He was just a small city at the border. He did not have any reputation or power. He was the city lord of a large city. Brother Qin is my guest. Even if you want to attack, you have to get my permission first. Let's not talk about other things. Your attitude right now is not taking me seriously. Spirit Lord Tongxian looked at him coldly and waved his wide sleeves casually. The powerful invisible shockwave directly sent him flying, and he fell heavily on the rockery. The extremely sturdy fake mountain shattered into countless pieces, and dust flew everywhere. Mu Bai spat out a mouthful of blood. There was also a dark red stain on his black robe. You've gone too far. After all, he was the city lord of a city. Now that he had suffered such a huge grievance, he had no way to seek redress. Is this how the profound heaven sect treats people? As expected of a large sect. Your bearing is extraordinary. Aren't you looking for me? I'm already here. Qin Yu walked out step by step. His steps were slow, but in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of him. As he approached, he helped Mubai up from the ground. Then, he stuffed an elixir to protect his heart meridians into his mouth. Only then did he size up this expert who had suddenly appeared. His strength was at least at the Sage King realm. However, he had faced a Sage King expert before. Now that another one had appeared, his expression would not change at all. He was just calm and deep. Lin Xuanyu did not know why, but he was a little flustered. However, no matter how strong a person was, could he still challenge so many people above his level? That was impossible. At least, he had never heard of such a thing before. Even a peerless genius could only defeat an immortal soul as a profound immortal. That was already the limit. It was enough for countless large sects to fight to take him in. Therefore, he did not believe that something even more unbelievable would happen. That was simply impossible. So it's you. To be able to remain calm under my pressure, you do have some strength. You do live up to your reputation. However, that's all. The strength of an immortal level expert is beyond your imagination. The gap between each realm is 100 times. Perhaps your talent is 100 times better than others, but it can't be higher. The strength of Spirit Lord Tongxian was there for all to see. Moreover, he was very confident in breaking through to a higher realm. He was not invincible among those of the same level. However, for someone like Mu Bai, who was at the early stage of immortal level, it was not a problem for him to take on 10 of them. Originally, he was prepared to go into seclusion to cultivate this time. He was going to break through to the Sage King realm. However, something like this had happened. He was prepared to go into seclusion to break through after dealing with this matter. Qin Yu's battle with others at the exchange was not completely fruitless. The experience that he had absorbed had turned into his strength in a short period of time. Compared to when he was at the exchange, he was even more powerful now. Your strength may be very high, but strength is never the right to be arrogant. No one in this world is born to look down on others. Qin Yu was calm. Even if he was facing a super expert who was 2 realms higher than him, he did not retreat at all. He was even eager to try. Chapter 899. You, good. Spirit Lord Tongxuan's eyes darkened. He really looked down on Mystic Celestial School from the bottom of his heart. With such strength, he was actually so arrogant. Qin Yu knew that there was a difference in strength between the two, so he chose to strike first. The weapon in his hand had been changed to a long sword. If he wanted to better display the strength of the dragon beheading chant, he had to use the drinking dragon sword. Whoosh, whoosh. Sword flowers dazzled everyone's eyes. The sky was filled with silver light. Tongxian's Spirit Lord's expression changed slightly. He raised his wide sleeves and gently waved them, collecting the countless silver lights into his sleeves. His dark green robe suddenly exploded with popping sounds. Spirit Lord Tongxuan's face was slightly pale. Beads of sweat had already formed on his forehead. Blood drained from his face. His strength is indeed not bad. That attack actually injured me. It wasn't just an injury. Right now, the hand hidden in his sleeve was severely injured. If he were to roll up his sleeve, he would only see a bloody scene. However, he was wearing a black robe after all, so it wasn't that obvious since it was covered by a large piece of clothing. Qin Yu himself had just comprehended this move, so he was naturally aware of its power. Seeing that he was holding on, he didn't remind him and didn't give him any chance to take a breather. The second move was unleashed. The dragon-slaying chant was indeed very useful, but the further it went, the more difficult it was to comprehend. He might as well integrate the advantages and improve them. Now, he was using a simplified version of the dragon-slaying roar that he had modified. He added in some of his own opinions. He hadn't tested his true strength yet, and Spirit Lord Tongxian was the perfect opponent for him. Just now, it was just a small fight. It looked powerful, but in reality, it couldn't kill with a single blow. They had the advantage of group attacks. However, if he wanted to seriously injure his opponent to the point where he would no longer be able to fight back, it would still be a little difficult. Therefore, his real move had yet to come. This time, I'm serious. I haven't given it a name yet, but I think it wouldn't be a bad name to call it Heaven-Shaking Collapse. In my estimation, It should have the effect of shaking the heavens and collapsing the earth. With a single strike, it can break through the ages. Cause the heavens and earth to change. Spirit Lord Tongxian snorted. How could such an effect be achieved? Even he had never thought that he could possess such great power. At the very least, Senzun was the only one who could unleash such power that could shatter the heavens and rend the earth. He even wanted to change the heavens and the earth, causing the heavens and the earth to change colors. Perhaps only someone above Senzun, who was only in the realm of legends, could do it. It was precisely because of the misfortune in his heart that he did not raise his guard. Without any preparation, he suddenly felt an aura that made his liver and guts shatter. The murderous aura that filled the sky seemed to have materialized. He could even smell the faint scent of blood. It was as if he could see his own appearance before he died. Impossible. What realm are you at? How can you have such powerful strength? This kind of power is enough to destroy the world. He had only felt such a fatal danger from people who were much stronger than him. But now, he felt it from a child. Moreover, he had nowhere to run. Spirit Lord Tongxian spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. Now that he was seriously injured, the thought of retreating even rose in his heart. Although he was filled with hatred, since he could not achieve his goal now, he might as well leave for now. For now, he would heal his injuries. Naturally, he had countless ways to turn the situation around. Just as countless thoughts rose in his mind. Lin Xuanyu was stunned when he saw this scene. Even his extremely powerful master was unable to teach Qin Yu a lesson for him. Previously, he had tried to avoid the trivial. Now, it seemed like a joke. He had now become a huge joke. However, Qin Yu would definitely become even more famous after this incident. Even if people talked about him as the first disciple of the Shentian sect. At most, they would lament that he was defeated by Qin Yu. They would only say that he did not live up to his reputation, or that he was born at the wrong time. And all of this was because of Qin Yu's sudden appearance. As long as he was no longer around, Lin Xuanyu would still be the senior brother that everyone respected. Lin Xuanyu's face was filled with determination. Suddenly, a fist-sized black ball appeared in his hand. Mu Bai had been watching from the side. When he saw the black ball, his face was filled with shock. It's actually the Sky Thunder Break. Dodge. Damn it. Why did this guy suddenly take out the Sky Thunder Break? Could it be that the Sky Thunder Break from before had actually fallen into his hands? If that's the case, I should have realized that something was wrong. The Shentian sect is good at producing such stubborn people. If they can't have something, they won't let others have it. If they can't kill someone, they will use all sorts of methods to kill them. Qin Yu also saw the black ball. However, what he saw was the black ball being thrown at him. In mid-air, countless cracks had already appeared on the black ball. Crack, crack, as the cracks appeared, they became denser and slowly spread across the entire black ball. Suddenly, all the cracks released a powerful purple light. Qi Yang had not learned how to speak yet, but he could sense the danger. He kept trying to pull Lin Xuanyu away, but it was too late. He still stood in front of Lin Xuanyu and wanted to block it. Qin Yu quickly pulled him back. Since it was the Sky Thunder Break, what could Qi Yang's small body block? Nothing could block it. If he were to join in, he would be throwing his life away instead. It was not worth it at all. Why do you have to go up? Do you know that it's very dangerous? At this moment, the Sky Thunder Break was already in front of him. However, he did not have the patience to slowly throw the Sky Thunder Break back. Just as he was about to block it, the Sky Thunder Break suddenly exploded. The powerful force almost razed the entire City Lord's mansion to the ground. However, in the end, it did not completely raze the entire City Lord's mansion to the ground. More than half of the City Lord's mansion had collapsed. Spirit Lord Tongxian was already injured. After being shaken by the aftershocks, his injuries worsened. He hated Lin Xuanyu in his heart. He could not wait to beat up this disciple that he was once proud of. Why was he causing trouble for no reason? However, it was not that he did not feel happy. Even he would not be able to block such a powerful force. Qin Yu would definitely be turned into countless pieces by this powerful force, If such a powerful person continued to stay, he would soon become a hidden danger to the Shentian sect. If he attacked the Shentian sect because of these grudges, it would not be worth it. It was better to kill him in the cradle. At least that would be safe. Chapter 900. With this troublesome factor out of the picture, he could temporarily feel more at ease. However, when the dust settled, he was shocked to see a red light screen. Qin Yu was still standing behind the red light screen. He was not affected in the slightest. When the red light faded, he appeared in front of him without a speck of dust. There were no unnecessary injuries on his body. Not even a speck of dust could be found on his body. How is this possible? How is this possible? Your strength is not so heaven-defying. When Huarong returned, she saw such a dangerous scene. She did not care about anything else and used all her strength to block it. Although the power of the heavenly thunderbreak was indeed very strong, to her, it was a bit like a joke. Due to her concern, she used almost half of her strength to protect herself. Half of the city lord's mansion was saved in one breath, and it was safe and sound. Coincidentally, Spirit Lord Tongxian and Lin Xuanyu, the main culprit, were together outside the protection. I don't know if his strength is heaven-defying or not, but you dared to provoke my son's friend with such weak strength. Did you eat a leopard's guts? If she had come back a little later. She was not sure if Qin Yu would have come out unscathed. Qi Yang was right beside him at the time. Qin Yu saw Huarong at the last moment. He did not try to stop her. Even if Huarong did not suddenly appear to help him block the power of the explosion. He was 80% sure that the heavenly lightning break would return the same way it came. However, he saw that Huarong had already made her move. He did not do anything else. Huarong did not care so much now. Her mind was filled with the scene she had just seen. If she had come back a little later, she did not dare to imagine how bad things would have been. Spirit Lord Tongxian did not even have time to redress his grievances. He was slapped to death with a single slap. Lin Xuanyu's name was no exception. Huarong first broke his limbs slowly. Then, she carefully kept him alive. It was only after he had been thoroughly tortured that he was sent to see his master. After doing all this, Huarong's gaze suddenly fell on Mu Bai. I'm sure I haven't done anything to let you down. Originally, I wanted to make a move, but that old fellow's strength is 2 small realms higher than mine. I'm also powerless. Alarm bells rang in his mind. The fate of the previous 2 people was simply too tragic. Not only was he killed, but his corpse had also turned into a pile of meat. Obviously, he would also be reduced to dust. There were no other possibilities. I know. I'll have to trouble you to take care of Qi Yang and Qin Yu for me during this time. Take this. It might be of some help to you. A glowing object suddenly flew out from Huarong's body and landed on Mu Bai's hand. When he saw clearly what was in his hand, Mu Bai couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Wasn't this the ancient god crystal grass that he had always wanted to find? This kind of thing was really too rare. Even if he didn't find someone to make it into a pill, directly swallowing it could increase one's strength. If he took it out and let someone make it into a suitable pill, it could even greatly increase one's strength without any side effects. He had been trapped in this realm for a very long time. If he didn't make any progress in his realm, his future would stop here. But if he had this, it would be different. He could use this to increase his strength, obtain a more possible future, and become a city lord with more potential. Even if he met Spirit Lord Tongxian again in the future, he believed that he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Just now, he was sent flying with a wave of his hand and was seriously injured. No one knew how much hatred he had in his heart and how much he wanted to increase his strength. Counting the things he had taken out during this period of time, there weren't many things. However, these were just ordinary things. There was no way to compare with this at all. Even if there were 10 or 100 times more of those things, in his eyes, they couldn't compare to this grass. Thank you. This thing is really too important to me. I won't stand on ceremony with you. Mu Bai was really too eager. Huarong didn't take this matter to heart. This thing was indeed quite precious. But for her realm, it was no longer a big deal. Mu Bai just did some small things within his ability. Huarong knew very well who was the one who really took care of Qi Yang. In the future, that so-called Shentian sect will still send people to cause trouble for you. I have a piece of armor here that can help you block all attacks below the level of a holy king. It can even block a holy king's full-powered attack 3 times. A fiery red heart protection mirror slowly floated out. This was specially made by Huarong using the blood in her heart and the hardest scale on her body. After spending countless precious treasures, he finally managed to barely take shape. Looking at the small piece of heart protection mirror that floated motionlessly, as if it didn't have any power, Mu Bai couldn't help but gulp again. How good would it be if this thing was given to him? This was something that could block a holy king's full-powered attack 3 times. It was just right for his realm. If he had this thing, without any accidents, he could safely advance to the level of a holy king. But now that he already had something, such a top-grade treasure couldn't be given to him. As the city lord, all he did was open the door a little, not to mention that he had other ideas. If he really shamelessly set his eyes on this palm-sized heart protection mirror, then he was worse than a beast. So he could only look at it enviously, but he couldn't ask for it. Qin Yu accepted it very calmly. This was the rightful reward. Although this was a very rare treasure, to Huarong, the most important thing was still her child. Compared to this, everything else was nothing. Naturally, he wouldn't decline the offer. As expected, she saw Qin Yu put away the palm-sized heart protection mirror. Huarong also let out a sigh of relief. She was already a holy king. Although she wasn't used to the fickleness of human nature, she also knew how greedy humans could be. If she didn't accept it, she would only think that Qin Yu was plotting something bigger. So this was very good. I see that your strength seems to be much higher than the realm you show in front of everyone. Although the martial arts you're currently cultivating are all top grade. But I have something here that can save your life. You can see if it's useful to you. Chapter 901. It was a palm-sized puppet. This puppet could only be used once, but it could crush anyone below the level of a holy king in its strongest form. It could even be used to deal with a holy king. It was not that Huarong did not have it, but she did not dare to take it out. Moreover, it was useless to Qin Yu now. Qin Yu did not even look at it and directly accepted it. He once again expressed his thanks. Huarong could not help but look at him again. Treasures like this were rare even to her. There was actually someone who was indifferent to such treasures, which could save one's life at a critical moment. These 2 treasures could be used for many things, one for attack and one for defense, and could ensure that one would not be defeated by a holy king. If not for the fact that she owed him so much, she would not be willing to take out the treasures that she had kept for a long time. Qi Yang seemed to know that it was almost time to part. He could not help but rub against Qin Yu's leg. Soon, he reluctantly let go again. Huarong already had the antidote in her hands. She could not take the initiative to feed him the antidote, so this step was left to Qin Yu. After swallowing the antidote, Qi Yang lay on the ground, black blood flowing out of his mouth. He rolled around in pain, and after a while, he fell to the ground on his last breath, but his spirit was much better. When Huarong went over, she easily carried her child in her arms. Thank you so much for this time. If not for you, I don't know what would have happened. If you have any problems in the future, you can find me at the Sea of Ascension. Mu Bai secretly memorized this name. After all, no one knew if he would have any problems in the future. With this relationship, if he encountered any problems in the future, he might be able to ask for help. Although the treatment might not be too good, as long as he could give a generous reward, it would not be too difficult. Qin Yu still did not change, as if he did not take the Fire Qilin clan to heart. In fact, he just did not think that there would be a day when he would ask the Fire Qilin clan for help. If he happened to pass by there, he could go and take a look. Otherwise, forget it. Before leaving, Qi Yang ran over to Qin Yu while skipping and hopping. He mustered all his strength and forced out a drop of heart blood from between his eyebrows. This drop of heart's blood directly drilled into Qin Yu's forehead. No one could stop him even if they wanted to. It was as if he was just a shadow. Before you left, you insisted on signing a friendly and equal contract with him. She already knows how to side with outsiders at such a young age. I don't know what to do in the future. Huarong looked on helplessly. Although the Fire Qilin clan was not as arrogant as the Dragon clan and would rather die than lower their heads, they would never take the initiative to ask for a contract. Others said that they took the initiative to request for a contract. Usually, it would be hard for others to find traces of their Fire Qilin race. Countless people wanted to find where they lived, and they searched until they broke their heads. Qi Yang, on the other hand, had actually taken the initiative to force out his heart's blood in just a few days to establish an equal treaty. Although they were considered equal, at most, they wouldn't be forced to do something without being able to resist. In fact, it was still a pet-like position. In fact, he wasn't any better than One-Eyed. At most, he had a little more freedom. But as long as he was summoned, he could immediately go to Qin Yu's side. Qi Yang ignored everything and waited for the contract to be completely established before he left in satisfaction. Mu Bai's envy, jealousy, and hatred were about to overflow. He never thought that Qin Yu would be able to harvest a divine beast so easily. Moreover, he took the initiative to sign a contract and looked extremely obedient. It was clearly something that he should have expected, but now that this kind of thing really happened, he still felt very surprised. If you feel envious, you can also find the residents of the Fire Qilin clan yourself and see if there are any underage Fire Qilins willing to sign a contract with you. Hearing this, Mu Bai was completely dispirited. If he could do this, he wouldn't need to worry. Not to mention signing a contract with the little Fire Qilin, he might not even be able to walk in. Even if he did, he would definitely be viewed with hostility. Forget it, I'd better think about how to rebuild my city better. That way, I, as the city lord, will have more say. Are you going to deal with the two corpses outside or should I? I don't want to get into so much trouble. Qin Yu directly waved his hand and let One-Eyed deal with the corpses. Actually, they couldn't be called corpses anymore. They had been crushed into a pile of minced meat. Mu Bai was really jealous in his heart, but he wasn't prepared to really do anything. But if he didn't do anything, he would still feel very uncomfortable in his heart. Seeing the minced meat on the ground that couldn't be washed away, he suddenly had an idea. He asked the kitchen to cook some minced meat stir-fried vegetables. He used the best spiritual meat that was full of immortal qi. Those dishes were also all kinds of heavenly treasures. Not to mention increasing one's strength in one mouthful, it was also beneficial to one's cultivation. Normally, he wouldn't even touch such a good item. Today, he went all out and took out the best materials in the warehouse. He asked someone to cook a large meal and sent it directly to Qin Yu. Isn't it too obvious that he's hitting the master? When the dragon soul saw the minced meat stir-fried vegetables, he didn't really want to eat it. Seeing the minced meat reminded him of the miserable deaths of Spirit Lord Tongxian and Lin Xuanyu. On the other side, the Shentian sect had already started to shake. Spirit Lord Tongxian and Lin Xuanyu died almost at the same time. The soul sees that the two of them created with special methods also shattered at the same time. They suddenly disappeared without a trace, which meant that the two of them were already dead. The current Shentian sect master, Sage Xuantian's expression was quite ugly. Spirit Lord Tongxian was the disciple he was most proud of. He was also the best candidate to compete for the next sect master. Normally, he thought that it was his duty to protect the Shentian sect. Moreover, he was selfless and emotionless. Such a person was most suitable to be the sect master. Now was the most intense time for the competition for the position of sect master. It wouldn't be long before the next sect leader's successor was announced. When the time came, he could also retreat behind the scenes and quietly break through to a higher level. But now, everything was ruined. Unbeknownst to him, the best candidate had already died. Along with his most promising grand disciple. They all died so inexplicably, and no one even found their bodies. What the hell is going on? I want to know everything in the shortest time possible. Sage Shentian immediately used most of the power of the entire Shentian sect to investigate thoroughly. Chapter 902. Both of them were in Baisha City when they died. The Profound Heaven sect's people were dispatched at the same time and soon found out everything that had happened. But it was precisely because they found out everything that they couldn't understand. How could a profound immortal kill an immortal soul and a celestial spirit at the same time? Those people are already here. Do you want to lie low for a while? Mubai couldn't help but worry. He was not worried that this fire would burn him. Instead, he was sincerely worried that Qin Yu would get into trouble because of this. It doesn't matter. If I run now, wouldn't it mean that I'm guilty? But I didn't do anything against my will. Everything I did was open and above board. Heaven and earth can be my witness. They should be the ones with no reason. How can I leave? Not only was he not going to leave, he was going to stay here and wait for the profound heaven sect's people to find him. Whether it was anger, it was fine. He was going to wait for this matter to be resolved before leaving Baisha City. Mubai couldn't understand how someone could be so calm in the face of danger and not take it to heart. But that didn't stop him from admiring him. Sure enough, someone soon found the city lord's residence. Many people saw what happened that day. But the Fire Qilin had already left. He wanted to build a good relationship with the Fire Qilin clan. Perhaps he could use the Fire Qilin clan in the future. So he couldn't reveal any information about the Fire Qilin clan to the profound heaven sect. He didn't know anything. He didn't know anything at all. The profound heaven sect's people were still furious when they left. They're really going too far. Do they really think we're fools? He didn't know anything at all. Someone saw the Fire Qilin on their side. And there were also people who saw eldest senior brother using the heavenly thunder break. There's so much evidence and he still doesn't admit it. Isn't he afraid that I'll expose him? Everyone will be embarrassed. However, Lin Xuanga remained unmoved by these words. Lin Xuanyu was dead. This was the best news for him. Even if he investigated, he didn't put in much effort. It was already good enough that he was dead. As for who killed him, he didn't care at all. Moreover, all kinds of evidence showed that it was the Fire Qilin's side who had acted. It was at least a saint king. Against such an expert, small fries like them would only be sending themselves to their deaths. Even if Spirit Lord Tongxian went there, he would definitely die. What could ordinary people like them do even if they were sent up? Moreover, he had no idea why Spirit Lord Tongxian would suddenly appear here. At the end of the day, they were still in the wrong. Therefore, no one could blame anyone. No one could blame anyone. Don't talk so much. We don't have to care about so many things. These things should be left to other people to do. If there's nothing else, then be a little more careful. Since we were sent here to offend someone, we should think about whether or not we've offended someone in the sect. Lin Xuanga scoffed at this matter. He courted death, and in the end, he really died. Furthermore, he had also caused so much trouble for the entire sect, causing him to lose a lot of time to rest. However, Qin Yu received an uninvited guest on his side. A woman floated down from the sky like a fairy. With a light tap of her toes, she stood on a branch. However, her body did not move at all. Her pink dress was spotless. However, her gaze was extremely cold, as if it was filled with endless malice. It's you. You don't seem to be very strong. You should be just an ordinary passerby who was implicated. But who asked you to be related to this matter? Spirit Lord Tongxian and Lin Xuanga gave me 200,000. I must give the sect master an explanation. You're just unlucky to have encountered this matter. Duoshu wanted to find a scapegoat. She did not have the strength to find the Fire Qilin clan. However, if she returned without any results, she would only be punished. So, she would catch as many as she could. Usually, they would use this method to complete their tasks. If they really could not find the culprit, or if the difference in strength was too great, then, they would just catch someone who was deeply involved in this matter and return to act as the culprit. This would be considered complete. Qin Yu was the most likely person she had found. If he had resisted and caused all this, it was not unreasonable. It was just that his strength was slightly weaker. However, this was not a big deal. She could directly cripple his strength and then bring him back to say that he was already at the immortal realm. No one would investigate in detail. She could also complete the task naturally and receive the generous reward. This person was at the immortal realm. However, although he was strong, His thoughts were not very pure. Instead of finding the culprit, he wanted to find someone to stand out and take the blame. He did not care if the culprit was innocent or not. He did not even investigate. He did it as soon as he thought of it. He did not care about the lives of ordinary people at all. Unfortunately, the person she provoked this time was not an ordinary person. Duo Shu's strength was not much different from Spirit Lord Tongxuan's. Qin Yu quickly blocked and counterattacked. He estimated the difference in strength between the two of them. Then, he took out the figurine that the fire Qilin gave him. Once enough power was injected into it, the figurine would grow with the wind. It grew taller and taller until it was the height of two people. Duo Shu's expression changed. I didn't expect you to be so strong. It seems that I've accidentally found the real culprit. Such a powerful treasure. Greed flashed through her mind. There was no immortal realm person who did not want to obtain such a treasure. However, she knew that she had to dodge now because she could not beat this figurine that suddenly appeared. She was outstanding for her dexterity. After dodging continuously, the weapon in her hand changed into a small dagger. Without hesitation, she went for Qin Yu's neck. Such a powerful treasure can only be used in my hand. Bang! Qin Yu just stood there. He did not try to dodge. On the contrary, Duo Shu was directly rebounded and took a few steps back. Just as she was about to reveal a flaw, Lin Yiqian's expression changed. A fierce light flashed through the figurine's eyes. The powerful force suppressed Duo Shu until she could not move. Suddenly, a huge palm slapped down. Duo Shu died. One-Eyed looked and resigned himself to take the initiative to clean up the corpse. Anyway, this was not the first time. Clean it up. After all, we are in someone else's house. It's best if no one can tell. Qin Yu recalled the figurine and returned to the house. Because Duo Shu had not returned, the people of Shentian sect were in trouble again. Chapter 903. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Why hasn't she come back yet? How could such a powerful person die without a sound? Duo Shu's death was a huge blow to them. Such a tyrannical expert had died so inexplicably. If someone were to say that there was nothing fishy about this, they would definitely not believe it. How powerful would one have to be able to kill such a powerful expert without a sound? In fact, they didn't even sense any movement. There were many people from the mysterious Heaven sect guarding White Sand City. However, no one knew how it happened. Everyone only found out later that the person was missing and speculated that the person was probably dead. It seems that we still need to be vigilant. We can't ignore the hidden expert. You just need to be vigilant. Let's go back to the mysterious Heaven sect and report this. Otherwise, all of us will die here. None of us will be able to return. Everyone's faces were solemn. Some even showed fear. They were not as powerful as Duo Shu. She was so powerful that the expert they looked up to had died without a sound. After that, when they met that expert, could they still resist? Not to mention resisting, they might not even be able to say their last words before they died. Mu Bai was having a headache about how to send all the people from the mysterious Iron sect back. However, when he turned around, he realized that everyone had retreated from his city. They were all fearful. After he figured out the cause and effect of the matter, he went to find Qin Yu in shock. I did kill a person. However, their sudden retreat has nothing to do with me. Qin Yu did not remember the name of that person. Anyway, that person was already dead. He was completely dead. Even his corpse could not be found. He did not know who the dead person was and did not want to know. However, Mu Bai had sent people to find out. Of course, he knew who the dead person was. He could not help but feel a little scared. It seemed that he should increase Qin Yu's danger level by a bit. Originally, he paid more attention to Qin Yu because of his talent and speed of improvement. He also had a good relationship with the Fire Qilin clan. But now, it seemed that he himself was a very powerful expert and did not need anyone's protection at all. That person is an extremely famous expert. Moreover, her actions are strange. Many people have died at her hands. Qin Yu was still not interested. Since the person was already dead, What was the point of him paying attention? After seeing his expression, Mu Bai knew that there was no point in continuing. Although he was extremely shocked, the person involved didn't take this matter to heart. Even if he was shocked, it was useless. He could only be more careful. If Qin Yu was really dissatisfied with him, he could deal with him the same way he dealt with Duo Shu. He could easily get rid of him. At this moment, he didn't even have the slightest thought of keeping her here. If this person stayed, it would be a disaster for him, a trouble that he could never get rid of. Who knew when it would suddenly strike him? Now that the entire Baixia city has been targeted, why don't you go somewhere else? You don't have any identity now, so you might be found out no matter where you go. Instead, there is a place that is very suitable for you. You can think about it carefully. It was a mixed city called Tianju. Close to Tianju was Yiju, which was the area where Baixia city was located. If he really wanted to go to Tianju, it would not be a troublesome matter. As long as he made the arrangements, he would be able to send her over soon. No need. I'm more interested in the Shentian sect. The gaze with which Mu Bai looked at Qin Yu was filled with fear and vigilance. In the end, he could only take out the news that he had just received. There are very few people who know about this information. He only managed to connect it with what Qin Yu said earlier by accident. There seemed to be a very powerful expert there, and no one knew where this expert came from. This expert seemed to be very important. Especially the people of the Shentian sect, who were in a terrible state. In fact, Spirit Lord Tongxian came from there. That was why he was able to arrive in such a short time. Unfortunately, he left his life here forever. Also, I heard that you are looking for the Dragon Clan's intermediate level. There are many different clans there, and the Dragon Clan is also there. However, their tracks have been hidden very well. I'm afraid you will have to slowly find them yourself. He would rather lose a large amount of resources than let the trouble continue to stay here. He couldn't afford to keep such a great god. If he made a move, he did not have the confidence to get rid of him directly. Thinking about the people who died so tragically, he could not help but shudder. No matter how he thought about it, it was better to send him out. That way, the risk he wanted to take would be much smaller. So much so that he had already prepared everything and was just short of sending her out. Of course, it was not as if he did not get any benefits. Now that things had calmed down a little, he could peacefully go into seclusion to break through. Qin Yu felt that it was a pity. In fact, he wanted to stay and interact more with the Shentian sect to see what kind of sect it was. If a powerful expert came, it would be a good opportunity for him to train his strength. Now, it seemed that it was not very possible. However, it was more important to find the traces of the Shentian Senzun. Now that he was somewhat famous in the immortal realm, he had already interacted with the Shentian sect a few times. However, he did not get any news about Senzun. It seemed that Senzun was a taboo topic here. Although Senzun was in the Shentian sect, he was also an extremely weak person who was nearing the end of his life. His strength could not be compared to the Shentian Senzun. Obviously, they were not the same person. They might not even be on the same side. Then I will go and take a look. Do you still need my help with these things? Mu Bai suddenly shivered for no reason. Without saying anything, he sent him out with a smile on his face. After sending him away, he wiped the non-existent cold sweat on his head. What a joke. How could he have the guts to ask someone to stay and help him? It wouldn't be long before the entire Baixia city would be torn apart. Therefore, it was better to send him away quickly. It was safer. This time, Qin Yu did not ask Long to come out and take him away. That was because the journey there was a long way to go. And he needed someone to show him the way. Chapter 904. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Tianzhou was the most mysterious and chaotic place in the world. Everyone knew that there were many opportunities there, and there were also countless experts. People of all races could exist there. It was a gray area. Yi Prefecture belonged to the human race. The human race was the strongest. Although there were places like the giant Dragon Valley, they were hidden from the world and never showed their faces. Therefore, they were dispensable. However, they could be seen openly there. Some races even ostracized the human race. This was a story for another time. Do you really not want anything else? I've already asked people to prepare so many things. Do you want to take them all? They're all very useful things. When you get there, you can quickly adapt to the environment there. Qin Yu smiled and shook his head. If he had to use such a complicated method to adapt to a new place, it would be better to just stay at home. Just like Mu Bai, he didn't need to go out as a city lord. He didn't need to prepare so many things. Wasn't that carefree? Since he often went out, he naturally made all the necessary preparations. The best way to deal with all changes was to stick to the status quo. Unlike Mu Bai, who was being so careful. Mu Bai couldn't say anything. After all, it had been a long time since he went out. He didn't know much about the situation outside. He could only hear about it from others. Most of the time, he didn't know anything. I can deal with these things. As for the things you've prepared, they're useless to me. You should take them back. I've already brought everything that belongs to me. I won't take anything that doesn't belong to me. Since it's a gift, I should have the right to reject it. Qin Yu said his last goodbye and left. In Tianju. As usual, there were huge and terrifying existences passing by in the sky from time to time. A powerful pressure enveloped every inch of the land without restraint. However, everyone was used to it and didn't take it to heart. They continued to do their own things. Or the hawkers walking the streets and alleys greeting every customer. Or perhaps, the shopkeepers of some shops were lying on the counter, bored out of their minds. They were using an abacus to calculate their accounts. Today, another person came. No one cared at all. At most, they would raise their heads to take a look before going back to their own business. There was an unchanging rule in Tianju. Don't strike up a conversation with any strangers. Everyone had to be vigilant. There were no real friends or enemies here. Order was a mess. The only thing that could be said was that the strong were respected. This was a principle that had never changed since ancient times. If you had the power, you could walk horizontally, vertically, flying, or even walking backwards. No one would care. If you didn't have the power, it was the complete opposite. You could be bullied on the streets. Are you preparing to stay or are you preparing to have a meal? The signboard is hanging over there. If there's nothing else, you can go and take a look. Such a casual attitude was the attitude of most people in Tianju. Qin Yu directly took out a sparkling, translucent and completely flawless crystal from his body. The shopkeeper's expression changed immediately. The abacus was thrown to the side. His attitude was so friendly that it was almost flattering. Sir, what do you want to know? Let's not talk about anything else. I know everything around here like the back of my hand. If you want to ask about something bigger, hehe, as long as you have money, there is nothing I can't do. Qin Yu noticed something was wrong as soon as he entered. Although the shopkeeper seemed to be indifferent, both the counter under his body and the wall behind him seemed to be completely different. There seemed to be countless hidden compartments. These small and delicate compartments were often used to send messages. What kind of place would need so many hidden compartments to send so many messages? It must be some large intelligence organization. Thinking that it wasn't some secret organization on the surface, he took out the money. Sure enough, as he had expected, this was an organization that sold information on the surface. Tianzhou's chaos and lack of order were exactly as the rumors said. As long as the matter is done well, there will be many benefits. There was an extra black bag on the table. The bag was bulging, and when it fell, it made an extremely crisp sound. Based on his many years of experience, the shopkeeper's ears twitched slightly. He knew that there must be a crystal of the highest quality inside. These things were very valuable. He immediately understood that this was a big customer. The smile on his face became even brighter. Even his old face was covered in wrinkles. I need a place that is safe enough to stay. And all the information about Shen Tian and the powerhouses that appeared out of nowhere. About the other party's strength, realm, age, and appearance, tell me everything. I want you to know everything. Of course, if possible, organize all the information about the Dragon Clan in Tianju. The shopkeeper's hand swiped and confirmed that he didn't need that much information. Out of the 3 conditions, only the first one was easy to fulfill. However, the latter 2 were not cheap. It wasn't that he didn't have any information at all. But he wasn't sure if Qin Yu could pay such a large sum of money. Of course, Qin Yu didn't have that much money on him. But he didn't just have money. There were things that were much more precious than these crystals. He only needed to deduct a bit from One-Eye's ration. The cost of buying information was more than enough. After the deposit was paid, the shopkeeper began to make arrangements. However, there wasn't much information about Xian Tian and the powerhouses that appeared out of nowhere. But someone accidentally found traces of an unknown powerhouse in a certain place and left the words Xian Tian. Other than that, there was nothing else. They could only provide information about that place and a series of guesses about the powerhouse's identity. Logically speaking, this kind of useless information shouldn't be sold at a high price, but they were the only ones selling this kind of information in broad daylight. It was normal for the price to be higher and more outrageous. The last piece of information was more common. Chapter 905. However, there was a huge amount of information. All the information related to the Dragon Clan in Tianju. Regardless of whether it was some groundless rumors or some news that was confirmed to be true, there was no doubt about it. They were all sent to Qin Yu. Just the information alone was enough to pile up into a small mountain. If you're willing to spend a sum of money, I can help you record this huge amount of information into a slip. That way, you can easily browse through the information. Qin Yu does not lack this bit of money nor this bit of resources. He directly engraved all the information he bought into a slip. It didn't take much time to browse through it. He only needed a thought to find the information he wanted. Of course, the price he had to pay was also very high. At this moment, outside this so-called very safe residence, 2 people sneakily stuck their heads out to look around. One of the people with unkempt hair and a dirty face pointed at the courtyard and said to the other person, "I'm sure. I saw him take out an endless amount of money with my own eyes, and he's not very strong. Although he should have some ability since he dared to come here casually and take out such a large amount of money, but you've already reached the immortal soul stage." The other person couldn't help but nod proudly when he heard this. Indeed, he had just broken through not long ago. However, this was the immortal soul stage. It was enough to make a name for himself in Tianju. However, his strength had broken through, but his wealth hadn't changed at all. He could only use this method. This was the so-called looting and pillaging. Originally, it was just that the unkempt hooligan owed him a sum of money and he wanted to take it all back. However, he now learned from the hooligan that a person who wasn't very strong had a huge amount of money in his hands. For him, who had just broken through, there was nothing better than this news. If I really get a sum of money from that guy this time, then, between the 2 of us, I'll take 9% and you'll take 1%. The hooligan gritted his teeth, his heart filled with hatred. No matter how big the money was, he would only get 10%. Plus, he still had to pay back the money. In the end, what he received was only a small amount, and it might not even be enough to pay for a meal. But now, he had no other way to repay this debt. Therefore, even if he could only get a small portion of it, he still had to do it. Not only did he have to do it beautifully, but he also had to guarantee that he would succeed this time. Otherwise, his entire family would have to live in the shadows day and night. There are 2 people sneaking around outside. One-Eyed, set up a barrier outside and see what they're up to. If they harbor ill intentions, just make them lose themselves in the illusion. In the end, just dispose of it and throw it on the street. Qin Yu then closed his eyes again. He didn't seem to care about what was happening outside. One-Eyed followed his instructions and set up a barrier outside, which would allow them to temporarily enter the illusion unknowingly. After the 2 of them entered the environment, they found that things had gone much smoother than before. They had successfully killed everyone and obtained countless riches. The mountains of crystals and the countless treasures seemed to be able to dazzle their eyes. One-Eyed clearly understood what they wanted to do. He didn't show any mercy. It caused them to be trapped in an illusion. The two of them thought that they had taken a huge amount of money and done countless things that they had dreamed of doing. However, after the drunken stupor, he died quietly. The corpse still had a proud and arrogant smile on it, as if it was very satisfied and proud. The sudden appearance of such a strange corpse in the middle of a crowded street only gave them a fright at most. Isn't this the hooligan Xiao-san? Why is the one next to him Boss Du? What a pity. I heard that he just broke through to the immortal soul realm not long ago. Yeah, it's really a pity that he died this time. Let's disperse, let's disperse. It's only 2 people who died. The crowd quickly dispersed in silence. Even if 2 people died, to them, it was just like eating and drinking. It was a normal thing. In Tianju, there were many people who died mysteriously like this. No one could control it. Perhaps some people would be greedy and take these corpses away. After all, some races didn't mind eating human flesh. The thing that Tianju didn't lack the least was other races. Killing and robbing were very common, let alone a few fresh corpses that suddenly appeared on the street. It was just a normal thing. This matter really didn't cause any waves. It was just that a few people saw everything. Mr. WNG had already learned about this strange person from the shopkeeper. He seemed to have a lot of money on him. And he seemed to have come here to look for something. But the strange thing was that his strength was only average. Before, he had noticed that the hooligan Xiao-san had his eyes on this person. He was thinking about whether or not to warn him, but who knew that he would die just like that? It seems that he's not a simple person. Everyone, be careful. Don't provoke him if there's nothing. Of course, record all his information. I have a feeling that soon, someone will pay a lot of money to buy information about him. His premonitions often came true. Not all of them would come true, but at least 80% of them would come true. Thus, the shopkeeper over there immediately started to have people enter everything that happened after they saw Qin Yu. After knowing that not a single detail was missed, he relaxed a little. In fact, every customer who transacted with them would be recorded just like this. In the end, the effect was quite obvious. They were sold to other people as part of the information. This was already an unspoken rule, and very few people cared about it. Even if they cared, so what? Those who were weak weren't a threat. Those who were strong, then they would set the price as high as possible. If there were fewer people who wanted to buy the information, no one would be able to hold them accountable even if they pursued the matter. Qin Yu noticed that someone was spying on him. But this time, he didn't have any bad intentions like before. Instead, it seemed like they were looking at him out of curiosity. He wouldn't care about this kind of probing gaze. But he couldn't let it continue like this. As expected, a so-called safe place wasn't safe at all. The money he spent before was wasted. Chapter 906. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. There was no place in Tianju that was absolutely safe. A layer of cold sweat suddenly appeared on Mr. Wanji's back. He didn't take this matter to heart at first. But just now, he could feel that someone was watching him. He couldn't find the other party's location and didn't know who it was. But it was because of this that he felt extremely terrified. He was always the one who spied on others. He had never seen someone watching him like this. This person's strength is far above mine. But who could it be? If his strength isn't above mine, then it's easy to say. It's most likely him. Qin Yu then noticed that a line of sight had disappeared without a trace. He probably sensed the danger. But it had nothing to do with him. The dragon soul had already investigated and returned. The place where the mysterious person appeared was really desolate. There were only countless caves and many ferocious beasts. Groups of beasts shuttled through the caves, bringing a lot of pressure to people. Very few people would go there unless they wanted to hunt those beasts. I did find some traces there, but I can't be sure if it was left behind by someone who stayed there for a long time or by someone who went there to explore. Although he found some clues, there were very few clues there. Qin Yu was going to take a look today. Even if there were fewer choices, and it was very likely that it wasn't Shentian Senzun. But since he was already here, it was better to go and take a look. There was a wasteland everywhere. Other than the wasteland, there was only a very large cave entrance. There was a kind of ape-like creature in the cave, but it often came in groups. Spiders lived in the cave and caught people on sight to eat them. But because it didn't have any intelligence, it had always been rejected. It couldn't be considered a race and could only be called a fierce beast. But this kind of monster still had some redeeming qualities. This kind of small beast was good at taking a special material in the mountain and transforming it into an extremely rare material. This kind of material was very expensive on the market, so there were often some strong people who formed small groups to explore. Now there were indeed some traces of people outside, but it was hard to be sure if they were left behind by the small groups that came to explore. There were several caves in front of him. Qin Yu just casually picked one of them and walked in. Sure enough, it was empty inside. There was nothing at all. Only the rotten and sour smell was somewhat unbearable. The soil on the ground wasn't soft, but rather sticky. When one stepped on it, a lot of mud would stick to the soles of their shoes. It looked very disgusting. As he walked forward, he heard some noises. A dark brown shadow flashed by as fast as lightning, its sharp claws glinting in the darkness. What an animal! Earlier, Qin Yu had already noticed that there was something in the surroundings. Sure enough, it didn't take long before the beast couldn't hold back anymore. He actually wanted to sneak up on him from behind. The dragon's soul stood at the side and did not make a move. Qin Yu slapped this guy to death. His strength was not bad, but perhaps because he had been guarding the periphery, his movements were more agile. However, it was lacking in other aspects and had no defensive capabilities. One slap was enough to kill this guy directly, and it seemed to be more than enough. Leaving a fresh corpse here would attract attention sooner or later. Moreover, these guys all lived in groups. The appearance of one meant that there were more not far away. It might even attract countless ferocious beasts. Let's leave here for now. Qin Yu was not going to stay here any longer. He turned around and left. Naturally, the body parts were tossed aside by them and no longer cared about. They could also be used as bait. As long as the corpse was placed here, the other murderers would only follow the smell to find the corpse. When the time came, they would not be able to find any trace of them. It would not be easy to discover their existence. After they left, a group of people walked in. After seeing the corpse on the ground, their expressions changed. He wanted to retreat, but a ferocious roar had already come out. The entrance of the cave had been blocked, and there were beasts with red eyes everywhere. They had nowhere to run and hide. Who the hell put a corpse here? It was actually placed at this entrance. If I had known, I would have chosen a few other places to come in. Let's not talk about it. Let's run first. The smell of blood on this corpse is enough to cause a riot. I reckon there will be an endless stream of monsters rushing out by now. The group of people killed the murderers around them cleanly, but they could only dodge frequently. No one would really go against such an existence. Without absolute strength, clashing with a large group of monsters would only cause them to die without a burial ground. Qin Yu had already walked far away, so he did not know what was happening here for the time being. Although One-Eyed saw it, he did not take it to heart. Wouldn't it be better if a group of people suddenly appeared to help them withstand this part of the pressure? On the contrary, it would make it easier for them to search deeper. Now all the monsters had been lured there. It also meant that it was more convenient for them to move. He could even walk around freely without encountering any ferocious beasts. Come out. You've been watching over there for a long time. Why aren't you coming out? Do you want me to catch you? Qin Yu's face did not have any superfluous expression. He seemed to be looking for air, but he knew that there was indeed a person in the direction he was looking. Originally, he just felt that there was something strange over there. After asking One-Eyed to look, sure enough, someone had used a special method to hide their figure over there. Unfortunately, this kind of thing was useless in front of One-Eyed. Gradually, a faint shadow appeared in the empty place. Soon, the illusory figure became even more solid until it truly stepped out. Sichu Hua was very surprised. How could his perfect hiding be discovered? He did not know how many people he had used this method to hide from before. Many people were even toyed with in the palm of his hand because of this. Nothing would happen even if he casually toyed with them. But now, Things were somewhat out of his expectations and somewhat out of his control. I don't seem to have to answer your question. Chapter 907. You must be the strange person who has been hiding here all this time. Suddenly appearing with great strength, such a person would usually attract attention. Situ Hua suddenly became alert. Suddenly, the yin-yang chaos balls in his hands shot out. One black and one white chaos ball streaked through the air. They brushed past Qin Yu's neck and smashed into the wall behind him, deeply embedding themselves in it. Then, a huge crack appeared on the wall, and it continued to spread. Qin Yu did not sense any malice, so he did not dodge. In other words, even if his senses were wrong, these two balls would not be able to harm him at all. The strange person who suddenly appeared was only at the immortal level. Once, an expert of the same level had died by his hand. Facing Situ Hua, he was naturally unfazed. Are you done probing? Originally, I only wanted to come here to find some clues. But now, it seems that you are not the clue I was looking for. Qin Yu did not manage to find any clues that he wanted here. Thus, he prepared to leave directly. To him, this place was not attractive at all. He might as well go find all the dragon clan in Tianju. That way, he could use them to increase his strength. All he needed to do was to beat the dragon clan into submission. But after hearing his words, Situ Hua's expression suddenly became a little strange. Wait a minute. You said you wanted to find me for clues. Don't tell me you want to find a powerful Senzun. Not long after, the two of them sat in front of a fire and had a long talk. Situ Hua had also arrived here not long ago. He came here because he was being hunted down. Something had happened in his family. Now, it was chaos everywhere. If he was found, only death would await him. When he was at the end of his rope, a Senzun suddenly appeared, saved him and casually threw him here. That senior seemed to have something urgent before he left. He told me to stay here. If anyone comes looking for him, I should tell them not to worry. He's just going to deal with some small problems. It's just that I didn't expect that the person I found wasn't as strong as senior. Originally, he thought that it must be an extremely powerful person, so he had been waiting here for a long time with apprehension. However, a lot of people had come in order to find out his background. He really spent a lot of effort to avoid those people's pursuit. For this reason, he had exhausted almost all of his mental and physical strength. Finally, the person he had been waiting for had arrived. Calculating the time, it just so happened to match up with Shentian Senzun's time. Now that he knew that everything was fine, the reason why Shentian Senzun hadn't shown up was not because he wasn't in the three realms, but because he had gone to deal with some trouble. Qin Yu was even less anxious now. Right now, it's quite peaceful outside. I don't see anyone trying to capture you. It's always been chaotic outside. Even if a few people died on the streets, no one would care. Why don't you go out? The environment here isn't very good. Actually, it wasn't very good. It was a complete mess. There was no order. As long as one was strong enough, one could do anything there. Even if one wanted to rely on their strength to take over this piece of land and become the king of the mountain. As long as one had enough strength, it wasn't difficult to do that. Defeat all those who resisted, and naturally, no one would resist anymore. However, this piece of land in Tianju was divided up by a few experts. They couldn't differentiate between the top and bottom, and the territories under their jurisdiction were also in chaos. There was no order. After all the experts only pursued strength. Of course, they weren't good at management, so they were still the same when they were in charge. Situ Hua had heard about it long ago. The reason he stayed here was to fulfill his promise. Right, this is something that Lord Senzun said he wanted to give you. It was a tightly wrapped box. The lock on the box was still hanging, and there was no trace of it being opened. If someone didn't say it, one would think that it was just an ordinary box. And no one would suspect that there was something special or strange in the box. Qin Yu opened the box directly and saw a book of martial arts inside. The Annihilation Thunder. Compared to the Heavenly Thunderbreak, the Annihilation Thunder's power was even higher. Even a Saint King would be reduced to dust under such a powerful force. Of course, for Qin Yu, it was also very draining. Situ Hua glanced at it unintentionally, and his body trembled. Could it be that this is the legendary annihilation divine thunder that could crush countless experts 10,000 years ago? Wasn't it destroyed by all the experts a long time ago? Now, why would it appear here? Back then, because the power of this move was too strong, all the experts worked together and used all their strength to kill that person. From then on, this was a supreme divine technique. It was completely lost and disappeared without a trace in the immortal world. No trace of it could be found in the entire ninefold God realm. He only knew about this because he had some background in his family. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the right to know. Because from a certain point of view, this was already a secret. Taking action in private to get rid of an expert who was a threat to everyone was considered a secret. After all, if word got out, it would seem that they weren't very open. Is it very powerful? Of course it is. I heard that not only is it very powerful, but it is also very difficult to learn. Back then, that person was already a rare peerless heaven's pride. When he accidentally obtained this secret manual, it took him nearly half a month to barely get started. As Situ Hua spoke, he suddenly saw a flash of lightning in Qin Yu's palm. Accompanied by a faint purple light, from time to time, crackling sounds could be heard. He suddenly felt a stinging pain in his face. More than half a month to get started. Was this really a peerless heaven's pride? Qin Yu had only casually flipped through it a few times, and he had already grasped it completely. Looks like I should try out its power. The aura of this divine thunder was extremely deep. It had a powerful destructive power. No wonder it was called annihilation. But as for how strong it was, he still had to try it out in other places. Don't look at me. I'll take you to the monster's nest over there. Go there and try it out. Situ Hua didn't dare to stay by his side any longer. He was afraid that his hand would slip and the divine thunder would hit him. If that happened, he would definitely die. Chapter 908. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Coincidentally, there was a place for them to practice their skills. In the depths of the cave, there were countless monsters gathered. If they accidentally barged in, there was a high chance that they would not be able to return alive. No matter how powerful they would only be exhausted if countless monsters swarmed them. However, Situ Hua was not afraid at all with the godly thunder of annihilation in his hand. If the godly thunder of annihilation could not allow the two of them to kill their way out of the tens of thousands of monsters, they would not be able to live up to their reputation. If you are confident in your own strength, you and I can go into the depths of the cave. It will be a good opportunity for me to broaden my horizons. I can finally experience such godly thunder of annihilation. Although no one would believe me, I think I will remember this for the rest of my life. Qin Yu happened to lack a guide. If Situ Hua suggested it himself, it would be fine. Even if he did not suggest it himself, he would have asked someone to lead the way for him. The underground cave was connected in all directions. Situ Hua had stayed here for a few months, so he could enter and exit as he pleased. He remembered all the tunnels in his heart. However, he only remembered most of them. One could only imagine how well connected the underground tunnels were. If he had to search for them himself, he would need at least half a day to find the real cave of the monsters. Of course, for others, they would not get lost in the complicated tunnels. They were already very strong and had a very strong mind. He kept the godly thunder of annihilation in his palm. Then, he went deeper into the cave. The deeper they went, the more gloomy and cold they could feel. There was also a faint smell of blood and a nauseating stench. All sorts of smells and gloomy auras were added together. It would be fine for an ordinary person to stay here for a day or two. However, if they stayed here for half a month, they would not be able to take it. From this, it could be seen that Situ Hua was able to stay here for a long time without being affected. He must have been through a lot and had a very strong mind. The moment Master came up, he met a young master from an aristocratic family with some status. However, he did not know which sect he was from, or which family he was from. Their speed was extremely fast, and Situ Hua knew the underground passageway like the back of his hand. In just a few breaths of time, they had already gradually approached the deepest part of the crypt, and the rotting smell that assaulted their nostrils became even stronger. It was as if there were countless corpses piled up in the surroundings, constantly rotting and fermenting. That was why there was such a nauseating smell. The smell here is rather unpleasant. If one were to walk further in, it would simply be difficult for one to walk. Based on my previous experience, it's better to quickly find something to block the sense of smell. Only then can we step in. Otherwise, the sour smell that is coming at us is really. Qin Yu immediately held his breath. With his current strength, he could even hold his breath for a long time. It didn't even affect his strength at all. The dragon soul didn't care about the smell of the rotting corpse. Sichu Hua was about to follow suit when he suddenly smelled a faint fragrance in the air. As for the cold and damp stench of decay and the faint smell of blood, it was as if it had suddenly disappeared without a trace. It was as if the feeling he had before was just an illusion. Why did it suddenly change? Could it be that those guys are all dead? But even so, there shouldn't be such a strong fragrance. He had never smelled this smell before. Not only had he never smelled it before, but he had never even seen it in other places. With his memory, there was absolutely no mistake. But where did this inexplicable fragrance come from? This was naturally the doing of the one-eyed man. This fragrance proved that it was in the ancient region where he had lived before. The unique fragrance of the grass that grew all over the mountains and plains. Other than this fragrance, it was barely edible and had no other effect. But this smell could also be regarded as refreshing. At least it was many times stronger than the cold and rotten smell from before. Of course, this was an illusion created by himself. He had only tampered with his sense of smell. The smell was simply too nauseating and unbearable. After understanding the cause and effect of the matter, Sichu Hua's shock did not lessen at all. He had also experienced countless illusions. Although he was not proficient in this field, he still had some understanding. But it was so real, as if this fragrance was right next to him. Even if he now knew that this was just an illusion, he still could not find any loopholes. It was so real and so magical that it made him dumbfounded. Sure enough, those who knew Senzun were not simple people. Originally, his attitude towards Qin Yu was very good and could be said to be very kind. But because of his strength, he placed himself on the same level as Qin Yu. But at this moment, he couldn't help but think highly of him, and secretly lowered his own status a little. Although there are many dire beasts inside, they are all insignificant characters. There are only 3 that I need to pay attention to, and their strength can be said to be not bad. If you need, I can help by the side and help you restrain them. Although he was not confident that he could defeat the 3 dire beasts, the rotten blood apes. However, it was still possible to hold them back for a short while, and even escape unscathed after that. Otherwise, as an outsider, he would not be able to live so peacefully after being surrounded several times. At this moment, a pair of terrifying scarlet eyes opened in the depths of the cave. It seemed to be able to see Qin Yu and Sichu Hua through the endless grey soil and darkness. Was it the hairless monkey that jumped up and down? I didn't expect to bring another one, eh? He's not very strong, but why does he give me a sense of danger? He seems to be a fatal threat to me. There seemed to be some doubt in the cold scarlet eyes. He did not understand why this person who had suddenly appeared could give him such a sense of danger. At his level of strength, there was an extremely mysterious feeling in the unseen world. Perhaps this person who had suddenly appeared was the death tribulation that he would not be able to pass, and could bring him the threat of death. When faced with a threat, he would only make 2 choices. Either flee or kill. Even if a mystic immortal was his death tribulation, as long as he was careful, getting rid of him would be the best solution. The scarlet eyes gradually faded. Only an extremely old and simple voice was left, echoing in the cave for a long time. It seemed to never dissipate. Kill all these outsiders, don't leave a single one alive. Suddenly, all the passageways began to shake, and dust was kicked up. Chapter 909. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Oh no. If not for the fact that all the ferocious beasts had come out of their nests for such a huge commotion, even if Sichu Hua was beaten to death, he would not believe that there were other possibilities. As expected, before he could even think about it, More than 10 small groups surrounded the two of them. He could not help but laugh bitterly. Looks like there's no shortage of people to practice with now. Countless monsters seemed to have received an order, and all of them came out of their nests, causing a huge commotion. If they could not leave in a short period of time, no one knew how long these tunnels could last. Usually, some of the tunnels would collapse, but these ferocious beasts would dig out a new tunnel not long after. However, if they caused such a huge commotion and all the ferocious beasts came to attack them, they would be trapped here even if the tunnels were dug out. It would be difficult for them to escape. These rotten blood apes are the most ferocious. Once they've made up their minds, they won't regret it. They don't fear death at all. Even if their limbs are flying and their flesh is torn to pieces, they won't stop. As long as they're still breathing, they'll continue to come to us. What should we do now? In just a short while, 10 bloody apes had already died at Situ Hua's hands. However, there were even more surrounding them. They were densely packed and completely surrounded him. No matter how much strength he had, he could not guarantee that he would be able to carve out an absolutely safe path. These damn and disgusting fellows were simply endless. In the end, as if he had made up his mind, Situ Hua suddenly clenched his teeth. He threw the yin-yang pearls in his hand into the air, forming a huge 8 trigrams diagram. He immediately suppressed them and temporarily formed an extremely safe place between them. Even if the bloody apes wanted to charge forward, they would be blocked by the 8 trigrams diagram and could not get close. I'll stop these fellows. You go first. I believe that since you could walk in unscathed and find me so quickly, you're definitely not strong enough. You'll definitely be able to leave this place safely. I'll take the pressure here. Don't worry, I'll bring up the rear. Regardless of whether it was the matter entrusted to him by Shentian Senzun, he still wanted to make friends with Qin Yu. At least, he couldn't get over that hurdle in his heart. It was only after a period of struggle and hesitation that he finally made up his mind and made such a choice. Bang 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 bang. Countless monsters crashed into them. They had rotten and smelly hair, red eyes, and fangs that were dripping with salt water. One by one, the faces squeezed over. At this moment, a thick wall of flesh had been built outside the 8 trigrams. Situ Hua's expression turned even more solemn. He could not hold on for much longer. As the impact on the 8 trigrams increased, fine cracks began to appear on its surface. When he saw this, he exerted even more strength to stabilize the 8 trigrams diagram and block all the pressure. You go first. Leave the rest to me. Hurry up and leave. It'll be too late if we don't leave now. Situ Hua was already having a hard time holding on. This situation was already his limit. In fact, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. At most, he would only be able to delay them for a short while. Any longer and he would have to personally take action. Even if he had the power to crush these bastards, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be exhausted. He didn't dare to use his own life to test the limits of his endurance. However, Qin Yu still stood motionless as if he didn't hear him. Just as Situ Hua was getting more and more anxious. Just as the yin-yang Pisces diagram was about to shatter. Suddenly, he laughed soundlessly, and wisps of purple lightning appeared on his hand. There was an extremely terrifying aura of destruction on it. It seemed to be able to destroy everything. Who said I was going to run? Do you still need to run in this situation? Now that so many have come, I can use them to practice. I think you've forgotten why we're here. Situ Hua couldn't help but be enlightened. But at the same time, he felt a little bitter. If there were dozens of them, it would be fine. He could slowly use them to practice. But there were as many as the sea, densely packed. As far as the eye could see, it could give one goosebumps for no reason. The purple lightning slowly condensed into one. The palm-sized thunder ball shone with a destructive light. The moment the yin-yang Pisces diagram shattered, the thunder ball suddenly flew up and propped up a huge net. It enveloped all of them. And it was still spreading outwards. All the blood apes that came into contact with the thunder screamed and turned into a pile of grey powder. Wherever the thunder passed, not a single trace of life was left. In just a few breaths of time, the densely packed blood apes around them had been wiped out. Qin Yu saw that he didn't miss anything and retracted the thunder. However, Its power was indeed a little shocking. And the move he suddenly thought of just now seemed to be extremely lethal. It was most effective to use it to clean up these densely packed little bugs. This is too unbelievable, isn't it? It's really enviable. You already have such great power at your current level. I wonder what you'll become in the future. At the very least, he would be at the level of an overlord. Even Senzun could look forward to it. Qin Yu was a little unsatisfied. Although this way, he would also be able to witness the power of the annihilation thunder. However, these were just some small bugs. Who would care if they stepped on a few ants to death? Even if he stepped on an ant's nest, it was still just an ant. Take me deeper and continue forward. There's nothing else here. Even if we come again, we can get rid of it with a wave of our hand. Then there would be no point. If he wanted to find something, he would have to find the most powerful one. Sichu Hua was a little stunned. Then, he nodded helplessly and continued to lead the group deeper into the forest. Now, he could see clearly that with his little power, he was just showing off in front of an expert in front of Qin Yu. If they really fought, with his high level, he wouldn't have any advantage at all. Indeed, there was always someone better. In this world, no matter how strong one couldn't underestimate anyone. Even if that person's level was much lower than one's, one couldn't underestimate them. Otherwise, if one was unlucky, how would one know if the so-called weakling that one looked down on just now wasn't the incarnation of some almighty being? Or perhaps a peerless genius in the future who had the power to cross a big level at such a young age and defeat a powerhouse. When that time came, one's death would be so unjust. As they walked, they left behind countless grey dust. Chapter 9-10. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. These were the corpses left behind by the little bugs that came to seek death. No one cared about how many grey marks there were on the ground. After all, they were too weak even if they came in a swarm. Qin Yu did not use his full strength at all. He just released a bolt of annihilation lightning and it was enough to kill all the blood apes. And in a place far away from them, a small group of people looked at the huge commotion that was all over the place. Their faces were ashen. If they could not leave this place, they would die here. No one could come and go as they pleased like Qin Yu with only the cultivation of a mystic immortal. Who caused all this? Don't let me know. Otherwise, I won't let him off. These guys are all moving. It seems like they came out in full force. This means that the guy who provoked the terrifying existence in the deepest part of the cave must be a powerful expert. At least, he is powerful enough to make the existence in the deepest part of the cave pay attention to him. How could such a powerful expert fall into their hands? In other words, even if they knew who caused all this, they did not have the strength to do so. However, they did not know that they were only half right. They were still working hard to survive. Gradually, they were all injured. In the end, they had no choice but to retreat. They were forced to go deeper and deeper into the cave. At the same time, they were approaching the deepest part of the cave from another place. Sichu Hua led the group and turned left and right. After passing through countless forks, they finally saw a wide open area. There was no lower city here, nor were there any buildings. There was only a sticky substance all over the ground. It was unknown what kind of rotten mucus was left behind. There were also countless blood apes. Moreover, there were not only countless little bugs here. One of them was 2 feet and 8 inches long. His body was fierce-looking and his eyes were red. However, he stood there calmly, sizing them up without any emotion. He stared at their every move. Are you the guy who made my king fearful but dangerous? Then let me get rid of you for my king. Use your blood as a sacrifice to my king's order. Qin Yu stood there and clapped with a smile. It was as if the other party was not talking about him. This was exactly what he wanted. As for the so-called kings, he would have to meet them sooner or later. To feel a threat from him, that person's strength would not exceed the Saint King realm. It was the best way to practice. Coincidentally, I also want to meet your so-called king. If I want to see him, do I have to pass through you? The tall blood ape stared at him intently. Without another word, he exerted force with his hind legs and leaped up. If they wanted to see their king, they had to go through him first. This was a fixed rule. This was also his life's mission. It was different from other monsters that had no emotions and only knew how to chase after flesh and blood. This was an existence with its own wisdom and even its own beliefs. This guy was different. But for Chinyu, could it be that a slightly stronger ant was not an ant? At the end of the day, the essence was still the same. Some of the stronger ants could only attract his attention, but they were still unable to pose any danger to him. After a few moves, the slightly stronger crimson ape was no match for him. Soon, it was defeated. Its body was covered in blood, causing countless ordinary crimson apes below to riot. Some of them were even ready to attack. They wanted to devour his blood and bones. As expected, a beast will be a beast. Even if you have such powerful strength, you can't escape from your instincts. After Chinyu finished saying those words, he directly slapped this slightly stronger crimson ape down with a palm strike. Then, blood splattered everywhere. As for those crazy ordinary crimson apes, they were all turned into powder by the power of his divine thunder. Not a single one was left. After they left, the small team reappeared here, but they were surprised to find that there was not a single crimson ape. Instead, the ground was covered in dust. But no matter how they looked at it, this place looked like the legendary crimson ape's nest. As expected, there is an expert walking in front of us. It looks like he used the power of lightning to destroy all the monsters in an instant. Used lightning? Could he be from the other 8 realms? They all thought of the mysteries of the other realms. If an expert from those realms suddenly crossed over, they would not be surprised at all. However, they were a little curious. Why would such a powerful expert come here? Looking at the situation of the battle, for that expert senior, he could directly destroy this place with a wave of his hand. It was so superfluous. It made them somewhat unable to see through this mysterious senior who was only in their guesses. What was his background? What was his purpose? When they walked to an extremely deep and huge cave entrance, Chinyu suddenly stopped and did not continue to walk in. It was not because he sensed how powerful the vast and deep aura was. It was because he finally noticed the few people who had been following behind him. Those people were getting closer and closer. This is really surprising. I didn't expect that there would be so much negligence. At this moment, because those people were walking very fast, they were in a hurry to walk over and see the situation in front. However, when they were grateful, what they saw was not an old and powerful senior. Instead, they saw 2 young people. If they counted the dragon soul, they could be considered 3 people. However, none of them fit the image of a senior in their hearts. The leader of the group could not help but look at Sichu Hua. It seemed that his realm was the highest among all of them. Could it be that he was the super expert who destroyed countless blood apes with a wave of his hand? Hello, senior. The few people bowed in unison. However, it was not aimed at Chinyu. Instead, it was aimed at Sichu Hua. Sichu Hua was smiling, thinking that they had good taste. They could actually tell that Chinyu was a powerhouse at a glance. However, he suddenly realized that the angle did not seem right. The cold sweat on his forehead dripped down in an instant. No, no, no. I can't be a senior. Don't you see that there is someone in front of you who is stronger than me? I'm just a guide. What a joke. He did not dare to take on such a big name. He did not have the strength to destroy thousands of blood apes with a wave of his hand. Not only did he not have that strength, but he was also very envious. Moreover, the emotions in his heart were very complicated. To be honest, it was not just envy. There was also a hidden fear. After all, as long as Chinyu was dissatisfied or unhappy, he could directly turn him into ashes with a wave of his hand. Even if he might end up better than those monsters. Chapter 9-11. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. But in the end, he would still be reduced to a pile of black powder. Nothing would be left except his ashes. Chinyu didn't say anything. It was just a title. Strength was something that depended on oneself. Others might think that he was strong or weak. It wouldn't affect his strength at all. Whether he was strong or weak had nothing to do with others. Why should he care about the words of these ignorant people? Looking at the slightly surprised and doubtful gazes of those people, he also saw Sichu Hua's expression of fear and trepidation. Qin Yu smiled slightly. Brother Sichu is just being humble. Don't be fooled by him. After all, his strength is there for all to see. He's already in the immortal realm. Sure enough, a look of sudden realization appeared on those people's faces. No wonder, no wonder. It turned out that Senior was just being modest. All of them were even more convinced. Sichu Hua felt bitter in his heart. But there was no other way. He was walking in front of them. And he had to face these people's questions and their worshipful gazes that made him feel pressured. All of this was within Qin Yu's expectations. Lan Feng was brainless and was used by others at the beginning. Later on, she shamelessly clung onto him and wanted to be his disciple. He knew that sometimes, having a great reputation and being respected by others wasn't a good thing. He came here to practice, to see the limit of the divine thunder's power in his hands. If there was a group of followers around him, asking him all sorts of questions, praising him as senior with smiles and fawning on him, then, how would he be able to do what he wanted to do? This was the so-called entanglement of worldly affairs. Now, Sichu Hua was mistaken by those people as an expert who killed countless blood apes with a flick of his finger. It saved him a lot of trouble. It's too dangerous to go any further. Brother Sichu, I'll go first. Sichu Hua knew what she wanted to do. She just wanted to get rid of these burdens and face the strongest ape king by herself. But he was full of bitterness. Even if he wanted to follow, there was nothing he could do now. Those people were too entangled. Moreover, they didn't know the truth of the matter. At this moment, he had no choice but to clarify the matter. But no one was willing to believe his words. Seeing her walk further and further away, he could not help but tell her the truth. However, no one believed him. They only felt that he was being too modest. Master is still more wise and decisive. Those people are really too noisy. Sure enough, it's better to have fewer people. Whether it's doing things or displaying my strength, it's more convenient and freer. As for Sichu Hua, he was forced to bear all the pressure. As long as he didn't take the initiative to expose the name of a super expert, he could gain a lot of benefits from it. The reputation of such an expert was also a layer of protection for him. At the very least, without sufficient strength, few people would dare to make a move against him. Sichu Hua quickly understood this point. Although he was mentally tired, he did not reject these little fellows pestering him. He had no choice but to temporarily retreat. But when he retreated out of the cave, he was unwilling to leave no matter what. At the very least, he had to wait here for Qin Yu to come out again. If something really happened, it would be convenient for him to rush over in time if he stayed here. If he could help, it would be better. Qin Yu entered the entrance that was half the size of a town. The kernels inside were pitch black as if they could not tolerate the existence of any light. In the entire immortal world, there were very few such existences. Once they appeared, they might not be a disaster, but they would at least be an overlord-level existence. Because this meant that the existence in the cave had the ability to devour a territory. Although its strength does not exceed the Sage King level. But it is also extremely special. It can continuously create low-level monsters like the Blood Ape. The Blood Ape's strength was comparable to a mid-stage celestial immortal. Thinking about the countless monsters with such strength running over without fear of death, it was enough to occupy a piece of land. This was a place that had already been occupied. But for some reason, the king in the depths had no intention of expanding outwards. It seemed to be very obedient. But even if these monsters had their own rationality and thoughts, could they still be obedient domestic pets? Thinking about it, it was impossible. But all bloodthirsty creatures had the desire to conquer the world. Of course, it was for a more abundant source of food, as well as the endless expansion of their ambitions. Qin Yu flipped his palm, and a warm white light appeared in his palm, illuminating the area 10 meters around him. This light was enough to illuminate 100 meters, but for some reason, the light seemed to be suppressed here. So it could only illuminate a radius of 10 meters around him, and could not illuminate any further. Sure enough, There was something strange about this place. And it was not just strange on the surface. Qin Yu turned around and began to walk inch by inch in the surrounding area. He walked extremely slowly. It was as if there was only the sound of his footsteps left in this world. Unknowingly, the people around him had disappeared. A pair of enormous crimson-colored eyes that were filled with tyrannical killing intent were staring at Qin Yu's back. It stretched out its sharp claws. This kind of trick is useless against me. Similar things have happened countless times. Don't you dark creatures know how to change your tricks? Every time, it tried to confuse his mind. But these things were useless against him. He had already sensed it when the owner of the pair of eyes stared at him. After all, it was so malicious. If its senses were really that weak, it could not even sense such strong malicious intent. Then he was not far from death. Even if I didn't go to graduate school, I couldn't have ignored you. Should I say that you are brainless or unlucky? The king of blood apes could not believe it. It had used this kind of trick many times. There was almost no one who could not be affected in this kind of situation. As long as he was affected a little, he would have won. While watching the battle like this was also his place. As long as he revealed the slightest flaw, he would be able to easily obtain the final victory. But no. Why are you not affected? No matter how strong and firm a person's mind is, they will be suspicious in a vigilant state. Have you never thought that this might be a trap set by me? I have never thought that this might be an illusion. As long as there was a flaw in his mind, even if it was just for a moment, he would doubt whether he had fallen into a trap. He would be able to seize the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. All he needed was a split second of time. How ignorant. Chapter 912. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Many people have died at my hands in the past. They were all in such disbelief. But that's only because they haven't met me. Just because you haven't encountered something in your life doesn't mean that no one can do it. That's why you're just a beast and I'm a human. Qin Yu sighed helplessly and slowly raised his hand. In each of his palms, there was a fist-sized lightning ball. The king of sanguine apes sensed the aura of destruction from it. The Tao of Nirvana. No, this should be a martial technique. But since you can control the Nirvana lightning so easily, it means that you're fated with the Tao of Nirvana. The king of sanguine apes suddenly laughed maniacally, its eyes filled with satisfaction. So what if you can crush me to dust? People who control the Tao of Nirvana are feared. Once you appear in the immortal realm, everyone will hunt you down. There was once a person like you who didn't understand the severity of the situation and had unparalleled talent in this Tao. In the end, he saved a weak girl out of kindness. That girl took advantage of his unpreparedness to pull out the hairpin in her hair and pierce his heart. Such a peerless genius fell just like that. What a joke, what a pity. Qin Yu had wanted to ask him what the Tao of Nirvana was. However, the king of sanguine apes didn't give him a chance to ask after laughing maniacally. It slapped its own chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. It fell to the ground and formed a small pool. Its bloody eyes gradually dimmed, and its huge body was on the verge of collapsing. It crashed to the ground with a boom. Even though the surroundings were dark, dust still rose up into the air. Due to the tremors, the tunnel outside broke inch by inch and countless pieces of soil fell. The mountain rocks blocked all possible exits. Only the deepest part of this huge darkness wasn't covered by dust. However, cracks appeared on the ground. Qin Yu's expression didn't change. Do you think you can escape just like that? I know you purposely left things unfinished to make me nervous. You want me to see everyone around me as an enemy and destroy myself. But it seems like you still don't know where you stand. Countless bloodlines appeared from his fingertips. They gradually formed a huge and strange pattern, emitting a faint ominous aura. When the entire formation was formed to the flag, the king of sanguine apes' body was completely covered. Qin Yu's king sanguine apes. If I want you to die, you will die. If I want you to live, I don't leave a single wound. Rejuvenation. The king of sanguine apes suddenly. But for some reason, he felt. It was as if he really escaped, he would turn into ashes and never be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Even his soul would be destroyed. As a result, he was forcefully pushed back when he was halfway through the jump. He was sanguine apes now. Was. Against SS under Nirvana Thunder Nigh translation how. However, he couldn't even bring himself to commit suicide. He just wanted to die a quick death, without any pain, and without dying at the hands of others. But even death. Even he couldn't do that. Now that his body was completely unharmed and he felt as light as a swallow, this was enough to prove this point. If Qin Yu wanted it to live, he could really make sure that it would not be injured at all. To be unable to beg for death, how terrifying was that? In today's world, saving people was always more difficult than killing them. I'll tell you everything you want to know. I just want to die quickly. The king of blood apes confessed everything honestly. In fact, he himself didn't know much. They only knew that anyone who grasped the power of nirvanic extermination and used nirvanic extermination as their power appeared. Then everyone would want to kill him. Everyone in the media seemed to have gone crazy. Especially those from the various sects. They did not hesitate to pay a huge price, and even let the secluded experts of their sects appear, just to get rid of this existence. Nirvanic extermination is based on destruction. Their strength far surpasses those of the same realm, and they can even easily challenge those of a higher realm. If you step into this path and want to cultivate, you have to destroy one after another. So it became the demonic path that everyone wants to kill. Of course, people with this kind of talent rarely appear. At least in the current immortal world, there hasn't been a genius in this area for 10,000 years. He couldn't help but sigh. His luck was really too good. He actually encountered a peerless talent that was hard to come by in 10,000 years. It was fine if he met it, but he just had to fall into the other party's hands. This made him feel a little depressed. I just hate that I was born at the wrong time to meet someone like you. It was fine if he was young, but his strength and talent were both extraordinary. This made it impossible for him to find a loophole even if he wanted to. Even his temperament was unprecedentedly strong. It was as if he could remain calm in the face of danger at any time, from the very beginning until now. He felt that Qin Yu was only slightly interested when he mentioned the so-called Tao of nirvanic extermination. And it was because of this little interest that he paid such a huge price to pull him back from the brink of death. If you have anything you want to ask, just ask. If he knew, he would definitely tell him everything he knew. He didn't want to be tortured to the point of being better off dead, nor did he want to completely disappear from the world and have all traces of him erased. However, Qin Yu didn't have anything else he wanted to ask. In the end, he still gave the other party a quick death. He let him die cleanly, almost without any pain. The divine lightning directly beheaded him. What was left of his huge body also turned into black powder bit by bit. Sichu Hua was anxiously pacing around outside. He even felt a little despair in his heart. On the other hand, the few people around him. They still treated him as a super expert. They were certain that he must have sensed that something like this would happen, so he pulled them away. All of them were shouting that they would remember the kindness of saving their lives. If they had the ability in the future, they would pay back the kindness of saving their lives at all costs. So much so that there were many who wanted to become his disciple on the spot. But only he knew that all of this wasn't done by him at all. It was done by Qin Yu, who didn't have to get involved from the beginning to the end. Suddenly, a bolt of divine lightning shot out from the ground. The purple lightning effortlessly created a path for him. Just as everyone's expressions changed drastically, Sichu Hua saw the lightning and was not shocked. Instead, he was happy. As expected, when he got closer, he saw Qin Yu's dragon soul. Qin Yu noticed the group of people behind him. He smiled and said goodbye, parting ways from then on. Chapter 913. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. If he didn't leave now, how would he have the chance to leave? There's no need to send me off. You and I will part ways here and walk our own paths to the heavens. The surrounding area was just a desert. After the collapse, the sky was filled with yellow sand, looking quite desolate. Qin Yu is walking on the yellow sand that fills the sky. He didn't pursue a goal, didn't choose a fixed direction, and just followed his heart. The yellow sand gradually retreated. Not far away, there were countless green forests. I've already walked here, and you still haven't come out? Situ Hua told me that there were 3 existences to be wary of, but I've only met 2. There's nothing special about the others. If I leave this yellow sand, I'm afraid you won't be able to catch up. Qin Yu originally didn't want to care about the remaining one. After all, one shouldn't chase a cornered enemy. He had no reason to chase after the remaining one. But that guy was getting closer and closer. It was getting closer and closer. Obviously, it was ready to make a move and couldn't help but want to attack. Instead of letting it think of ways to ambush him, it was better to make a move now. It would completely eliminate a hidden danger. This way, there wouldn't be any worries ahead. The existence in the dark, he didn't expect to be discovered. It was different from the others of its kind. It didn't just have its own intelligence. It was also extremely good at hiding. This was its extremely special talent. In the entire race, there was only one existence that was so good at hiding. Since you've discovered me, I know that I'm not your opponent. I just want to know if my king is safe. Qin Yu thought of the so-called king. Other than having no freedom now, he was safe and sound. But suddenly, the sound of wind breaking came from behind him. Silver-white sharp claws suddenly attacked him. It went straight for his throat. As expected, I can't believe your words. A beast will be a beast after all. It doesn't know how to keep its word. As expected, a beast will be a beast. Qin Yu waved his hand and a golden light shot out. Against such a weakling, he didn't even need to use the divine thunder. He could easily block the sneak attack with a single move. You're underestimating me too much. In fact, it wasn't that he had underestimated Qin Yu. Instead, he placed too much importance on his own strength. After all, he was the one and only existence in the tribe. No one else could see where he was hiding. As long as he was hiding, the only person in the entire tribe who could see him was his king. However, it was only because of the aura on his body that they could detect him. In fact, if he had some kind of treasure that could hide his aura, even a king wouldn't be able to find him. That was why he was so powerful. However, no one had ever exposed his methods. Suddenly, he was exposed so straightforwardly. All of his methods were useless. It wasn't that he was too weak. It was only because his opponent was too strong. There was no suspense in this exchange. Qin Yu directly attacked him and crushed him. It was much smaller than an ordinary blood ape. Moreover, his body wasn't blood red, and there wasn't even a strong smell coming from him. This meant that this guy's strength was already extraordinary. They were extremely special among their race. Moreover, his strength wasn't like the other members of their race. He was more inclined to hide in dark corners and launch sneak attacks. That was the difference between the two. What a pity. His strength is not bad. It's a pity to kill him directly. I wonder how likely it is for such a special existence to appear in a tribe. Thinking about the overwhelming number of them, he knew that the probability of that happening was extremely low. He didn't know when he would encounter such a special existence again. Thinking about it, the probability of encountering such an existence should be relatively low. After leaving this yellow land, he arrived in a dense forest. The difference between the two places was only a little. One step, but he stepped into two completely different places. Before stepping into this place, it was really a yellow land that didn't change at all. However, as long as he took another step forward, he would feel refreshed. From time to time, he would hear the chirping of insects and birds. It wasn't like the previous step, where he couldn't hear anything at all. Tianju is indeed a magical place. Not far from here. Fog rose in spirals. The middle-aged man looked at the fog and was slightly excited. He had received accurate information that there was a 1,000-year-old supreme god seed here. Now that he came here, he found that it was indeed a good place to nurture it. If it was said that a good supreme god seed could be nurtured here, he would definitely believe it. After entering the fog, the middle-aged man suddenly let out a miserable cry. Blood suddenly seeped out of his body and meandered down. Soon, A small pool of blood formed on the ground. After the blood on his body had almost flowed out, he fell to the ground, his life and death unknown. Soon, his body gradually became cold. Before he died, his eyes were still filled with confusion, as if he didn't know who attacked him. The spiraling fog covered all of the smell of blood. Not long after, this place returned to the appearance of a fairyland. It looked like a dream, as if there was no danger at all. The place where the pool of blood used to be in the world had now returned to the soft soil. The thin leaves kept stretching, and this grassland looked incomparably peaceful. On the surface of the lake, strands of fog rose from time to time. Just now, there seemed to be some movement here. Although it disappeared in an instant, he was still certain that something had happened here. He just didn't know what had happened here. After walking in, he could feel the dense immortal chi here. The immortal chi was pure white and flawless, as if it was about to materialize. Countless leaves grew on the ground, and there seemed to be spots of light on them. Under the indistinct fog, one couldn't help but want to go in and take a look. It was as if there was some rare treasure hidden here, a peerless inheritance. There's something strange here. I keep feeling that there's an ominous aura here, as if someone had just died here. But the strangest thing was that there were no corpses here, nor was there any smell of blood. It looked very peaceful, but there were no living creatures around. The only living creatures were the plants growing on the ground. But these plants looked a bit strange. Just like the fog, at first glance, they seemed to be extremely good things. But upon closer inspection, one faintly felt that it was ominous. Only a small number of people could feel that, and most people couldn't even get rid of the faint temptation.